Deep Fried Thoughts, it's the best podcast. Deep Fried Thoughts. Don't worry, we're working on a better intro.
All right, dude. So welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm sure you are. I believe it. We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah, we have.
You made a long trek. Where'd you come from?
Well, I originally came from Seattle
Yeah.
a year ago, but I've been living in Virginia for the last year.
Yeah. So everything you told me about Virginia has been negative. So it's hard. I've never moved to a new city. Like, you didn't have friends there, right? You moved there for a job.
We had a family there that
Okay.
we knew.
Okay.
Yep. Stayed with them for a little bit to check it out. But yeah, it's not all bad.
Okay. I want to hear some positives.
Yeah,
Give me something good.
Listen, Virginia is a very beautiful state,
All right.
and the weather is nice. I mean, it's sunny.
Yeah.
You know, like in Washington, it's dark, it's cloudy, it's gloomy. I don't know.
So you make the move out there. So, all right, well, actually, first of all, I know I've already talked to you about this. We've been hanging out. For me, all I know about Virginia is like West Virginia. I've gone camping there.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I've shot crazy guns there. I've had a blast in Virginia. And even unknowingly, running drugs. Didn't even know that was, anyway, I'm not even going to get into that too deep. But yeah, that was my experience with Virginia, and it was awesome. But it was all West Virginia, and I always associated them as being equally the same.
Yeah,
I just don't know.
historically speaking,
Yeah,
they were the same.
that's wow. Okay,
But I don't know all the details on that, so we don't need to get into that right now. But yeah, they broke off at some point, and so. But what I will say is, I do enjoy that John Denver song.
well that's all I have to go on, and I put that song on even knowing you were coming, and
Yeah.
I was like, man, like I think that's where I need to go. Like, this sounds great.
Oh yeah,
It's good stuff.
yeah. No, I mean, when you put that song on, it's we're in Virginia, Rocky Mountains.
Oh, I'm there. No matter where I'm at, I could be driving through Delco. I put that song on, going down the highway. I close my eyes, and I'm there until I hit the and I got to swing back in my lane, and then I'm back to Delco.
Let's
But
go.
for that little moment, it's beautiful.
John Denver.
But anyway, you brought a gift.
I brought a gift.
and I just downed that really quick. That was great, the Elijah Craig. But yeah, dude, the E.H. Taylor small batch. This was awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I'm excited to crack this.
I'm
bad boy
very
open.
excited to try this with you and to see what you think. This was given to me, not this bottle because this is your bottle, but I was given a bottle.
Is this a regifted bottle?
It's regift. No. I waited in line for this bottle. I waited in line, ABC store in Virginia.
Are we talking like a checkout line, or was
No.
it okay?
No. I'll get into that in a little bit.
I didn't know if this was like a CNN headline or something.
No. So the way that it works,
My knife.
you're really struggling over there.
I really am.
The way that it works in Virginia. So I tell people in the
Hold on a
state of
second.
okay.
There's a little tap on the top.
Yeah.
that
Let's do it the easy way.
spins around.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Look at you go.
Anyway,
So
all
you're
right.
figuring it out.
Go ahead.
It's a Pennsylvania thing.
Ouch.
Philly guys always trying to use their teeth to open everything.
Oh, dude, I've been getting yelled at for that like my whole life, especially my mom being a dental assistant.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So while Carmen's figuring that out, very nice. Oh, do you like it? The juice,
That smells good. That smells very good.
dude. That's some good juice right there.
There you go, sir.
Prost.
Cheers.
Oh yeah, dude. Cheers, dude. All right. We gotta get the nose a little bit. Oh,
I just wanted to jump in.
you just jumped
That's
right
smooth. That's good.
in. Oh,
Have you ever seen that old clip of the guy? He's like teaching you how to drink bourbon, and he's like, "And put it up to your lip and your nose." And he's like, "Now not here or there." And he puts it like below. He shoves it right up to the mustache and he goes, "You got to get all the way in there." And he's like, and that dude is sniffing it like it's
Dude.
glue.
Oh no, he's going hard for it. What I love is the. Do you remember the that video that was making the rounds with the ice cream taster guy? Where he
Yes.
That's a 10. That's a 10. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was good stuff.
Yeah, I would say this is a 10. But I was going to say with the Virginia ABC store, so the way that it works, I joke with people and say that Virginia, it feels like the way that they do bourbon, they're all about equality of opportunity for everyone, for all people. So in Washington State, the way that I would get a bottle of that, because that's an allocated bottle, which I am a fan of your podcast, so I have listened to other episodes. And I think someone else spoke about this and mentioned it was kind of like the Yeezys, where you buy the Yeezys at MSRP, but then you turn around and flip them on StockX for like you know exorbitant amount of money. So the same is true of bourbon. For those that don't know bourbon, this bottle is an allocated bottle, which means that it's not something that you can readily find in a store somewhere in most states. If it is in a store, it might have a hefty markup. Although there are some rules about reselling and what you can mark it up to. But in Virginia, they do a lottery system where you can, like everyone in the state has access to this. If you have a driver's license, you can enter into the lottery and they will select, you potentially, I haven't ever been selected, so I think it's kind of a scam. But they also will alert you and say, they'll send an email if you're on the list, and they'll say, okay, well, on this Saturday, we're going to be doing a drop, and these are the bottles that are going to be at the store, and the store opens at 10 a.m. And so what ends up happening is on that Saturday, you get people that are just incredibly dedicated bourbon drinkers that, like, they show up, and I'm not even kidding, they show up at 3 a.m.
That's crazy.
With their lawn chairs, like waiting
For a bourbon.
for the bourbon.
Dude, here it's all luck. You just have to walk in.
It's luck.
Or like know the guy.
But in Washington State, where I moved from a year ago, the tribes out there, they kind of run things in terms of, they get kind of, first dibs on fishing rights. They get first dibs on bourbon and other things, casinos, gambling and everything. Out there, I know a guy. And so it's like, you go to the place and you're like, he brings you to the back room and he's like, hey, you can have one of these.
Yeah.
And then you select it.
If you spend enough money in the store, right?
Yeah, but you have to know the guy.
Yeah.
And you have to be cool and kind of,
It's definitely like that here.
you have to
in
kind of
PA.
work the system a little bit.
Yeah.
You have to have a little bit of personality. So I like to think, because I'm in sales and all that, kind of gives me a leg up in Washington State. But in Virginia, it's like, no. You're all waiting.
I kind of like
Get
that.
in line.
I kind of like that. I feel like in Virginia, I'd have a chance, or at least some hope of getting some pappy.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, not the pappy.
Not the pappy.
That's a lottery pick.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'd have some hope,
Well, you have a hope.
right?
But it's dashed quickly when there's 80,000 entrants and there's only like 4 bottles.
Yeah. That's like one of those things, even if you're not a bourbon drinker, it's like, I'm going to put it on this lottery because if I get it, that's a huge come up. Right? I mean, I'd have a hard time cracking that bottle. I probably would. I probably wouldn't sell it. But I would definitely consider it. As soon as I get the bottle, I'd definitely be looking at what I can flip it for.
This is so good.
But it'd be too much fun to crack open when friends come over.
Oh, dude, I just want to take a moment to just savor this.
It's very good.
It's delicious.
it
It's
is very
actually
good.
better than I remember it. I was gifted this bottle, I want to say it was 2 years ago for my birthday. Pastor of mine actually gifted me this bottle, and it was kind of my first, like, nice bottle that I was gifted.
Yeah.
That was like an allocated bottle. And I remember, like, the packaging, it just looked so nice. And we cracked it open, and it was funny because we were at a birthday party, and I had a buddy who was like, this is amazing. And he takes my bottle, and he just starts, like, passing it around to everybody. You've got to try this. And he's pouring my bottle in everybody's, like, shot glass.
Yeah.
I'm just, like, looking at my bottle going, no. Because you're just like, man, I want to enjoy this.
Yeah.
I want to savor
Oh,
this.
absolutely.
You know?
Well, thank you very much. Seriously, that was awesome. That's been on my list for a while.
Yeah, I'm
So
happy you like
that's
it.
cool.
It's a good one.
So, dude, we've had a crazy week, right? So, I don't know when you're listening. You're listening to this probably in a couple weeks, but President Trump, an ex-president of the greatest nation, the United States of America, survived an assassination attempt.
It's crazy.
Where were you when it happened?
So, not to make this whole podcast about bourbon, but interestingly enough, I was actually hosting a bourbon night with a bunch of guys that I had met, locally here in Virginia. So we, the wife and kids, they went back to Seattle, went ahead of me for a week to get some time out there. I'm going to be joining them in a week, but a little vacay time. So, being me, I'm batching it right now. So, I just invited a bunch of guys over. I smoked some brisket. I smoked a big old brisket.
Nice.
Which turned out, pretty good. But yeah, I had a bourbon night there, and my wife texts me because, I'm trying to be the good host and, chatting it up with everyone. And she texts me and she says, Trump got shot. And I'm just like, what? Because at that point, we don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so Trump got shot can mean a lot of different things. Now, it turns out he was barely shot, but he was shot no less. And so it was interesting because immediately, like I told that to the group, I like shouted it out to everybody. I was like, guys, Trump got shot. And there's like probably like 10 guys in the house. And everyone's had a few bourbons, and they're all like, oh my gosh. And like everyone's freaking out. But it was interesting because there was one guy there who like immediately, he just instantly goes into like, well, maybe this was a setup and, all that.
Before even seeing anything?
I don't know if he saw it or not, but I mean, it was like, it just had happened. And he's already like sprinkling in this like setup thing. And I'm just thinking like, so I don't know these guys very well. So I'm not in a position to like push back or like argue or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think the room is more conservative leaning than not, which is something you find when you live in Virginia. So put that in the win column for me.
There you go.
As a conservative, I do like being around my tribe. It's nice. Actually having people that, we share some commonality in our belief. Not that that's, the only thing. But yeah, it was interesting because he kind of, sowed those little seeds of doubt. And then, it was interesting because, everyone's now thinking like, okay, well, and kind of challenging him a little bit on that.
Like right away.
Like right away.
Okay.
And like in that way, because no one really knows each other. That's the thing this is like.
Oh, that's such an interesting place to be.
It was a weird place to be because we're all like neighbors. So a bunch of the guys that showed up are neighbors. And like, there's hardly anyone who knows anyone. And so it's kind of one of those situations where you're going, okay, like we don't know each other. Are we going to get into this like political stuff like right away? And I tried to kind of lay off of it because I was kind of thinking in my head, I wonder if things are going to get political with the discussion because of just like the temperature of the country right now.
Yeah.
But then it was like Trump got shot. It's like, okay, well, we're going right at the deep end. I mean, it's getting political right away. And it was just interesting him kind of, sowing those seeds of doubt of like, okay, he's he's like the greatest showman president that we've ever had. Perhaps this was staged. And for me, I'm just kind of going like, all right, well, at the time I didn't know that that anyone got killed. I mean, I didn't see the footage or anything. I mean, it was like, I think I put it on right there, but it was just like, didn't know anything. But where were you?
So I was at my brother. All right, my brother is having a baby, and they were having a baby shower that wasn't just for the girls. It was basically like a family event. Like there was family, friends. We were actually camping over on the property. He lives in the woods. And it was basically like me and my family, her family, and then like a bunch of their friends from New York. So I was surrounded by like 50-50 of people that I'm making an assumption, were like very left leaning, mostly because of where my brother was when he lived in the city, like, politically and socially. And I didn't have any service. And we parked further away just so there was room on the property, because there were so many people showing up. So we parked like on another street. And there was like a little trail through the woods to go through. So I went to go grab something from our car. And as soon as I emerged from the woods, my phone just starts going crazy. And I pick it up and I'm looking, and it wasn't like the Trump. It was just like text messages, things that just I wasn't getting. And I saw something about him being Like, is he okay? Something like that. So I popped open the chat, and I'm just like trying to catch up quickly. And dude, I didn't know what happened really, and I just knew he was shot.
Yeah.
And someone posted a picture of the blood running down his face, and I couldn't even read. Like, I couldn't comprehend the words. I kept reading the same thing over and over, but I couldn't grasp it. Mm-hmm. And all I kept thinking was, I'm so far from home. I'm so far from my guns. I'm so far from even my family right now. I want to be like right there with them. And I had like a little moment of panic where I just had to pull it up, and I saw that he was okay. And it wasn't that I wanted to go out and fight or anything like that, but the country is at such a crazy state, you know, myself included. Like, at this point, I am so gung ho for Trump. Like, I'm not saying he's a god or he's a perfect man or anything. Like, he made tons of mistakes his first presidency, and I believe he's going to make tons of mistakes the second one because he's a human being just like the rest of us. But I'm putting a lot of eggs in that basket. Like, he has got a lot of my hope right now in this country is leaning on him. Not just him as a man, but I believe God is involved in what's going on right now in this country. And anyway, I was freaked out.
Yeah.
So he was okay. I didn't even know there was video footage. Like, I didn't really understand the setting. I didn't realize he was at a rally or anything. And it ended up being about 4 hours from where I was, where it happened. And so, I get the stuff out of the car, and I go rush back, and I go and I start just sharing with people, hey, like, Trump was shot. He's okay. And then I go over to my brother who's sitting on the ground. Like, the look on his face, man, it was like that. It just felt like that's what I was feeling inside. Like, he's sitting there with a bunch of his friends from New York, and I walked over, and I remember thinking, like, don't react if they have some smart ass thing to say. Like, and I wasn't trying to judge them. I was just like trying to prep myself because people have said horrific things about this man.
Yep.
Like, whether they know or not. And I was just like prepping myself to be like, don't go in there like a Trump maniac. Just be like, hey, this just happened. So I walk over to this group of people, and I was like, hey, did you see what happened? Everybody said no. I said, President Trump was just shot. It does appear that he is okay, survived, but I don't really know much details. And that's when everybody started pulling up their phone. Then we saw the video. Dude, I was crying.
Dude.
When I saw it, I was very emotional.
Yeah.
It was a lot. It was so many different emotions. There was fear, uncertainty. I still didn't know like how people were going to react. I mean, I think like most people, like if he was killed, I think there would be at least riots and like unrest.
Yes.
There would definitely be
100%
some casualties from, I mean, like both sides. I think both people like would have just, I don't know, I think people would have lost their minds. You know, there's a lot of psychos out there that I feel like want this like country to go into civil war without even understanding what that means. Like, I see the way people talk on X, and even myself, like I have, since this happened, tried to be very calm with the way I speak about left and right. And it's weird. It reminded me when I was working for my buddy Eric, Eric Nolay. So his wife, Joanna, I used to work for her doing like floral arrangements and setting up for weddings. Beautiful stuff for her company. And I remember when this was like back in 2015, we were talking politics, and sometimes it get popped up, in work. And I feel like I was one of like 2 or 3 people that were right leaning. And so the conversations were always interesting, and I loved having them. I was never like hateful towards anybody, but I remember Joanna saying like several times, I just can't stand this rhetoric of the left and the right. And that really wasn't a thing like it was in that time. Mm-hmm. Like, we were so divided. And like, for me, like, I'm not blaming Obama, but like going back to like the Obama years, that's when things started feeling a little bit more racially charged, politically charged, people really diving into their tribes. And, I've had a week to think about this stuff too. And it's just like, we've really like leveled things up or raised the heat.
Ramped it up.
We shouldn't be surprised. And this isn't the first time that there's been political violence. I mean, You have the Summer of Love where I think like 32 or something people died. I watched a lot of them live. Like I remember the one guy who was trying to protect his friend's store, and some guy who wanted to steal a TV shot him, like this 50-year-old retired cop or grandfather. Maybe, I think he was even older. I'm just like watching this man die on the street because he wanted to protect a store, and somebody else was like using political outrage of George Floyd to just get a TV and kill a man.
Yeah.
It felt like lawlessness. It felt like lack of lack of humanity,
Totally.
like just not seeing people as humans. And I feel like that's what we have done to Trump. Like this nation and like the media, and I'm not saying the left is the only guilty one. Like I really feel like we on both sides have definitely brought things up to a level that is dangerous. And I think we just got a taste of what we were calling for, whether it was subliminally or subconsciously. Like we were all calling for that. Like, I don't know about you. Do you, I don't know how comfortable I feel about it now, but like, have you ever gotten any kind of enjoyment watching like the Antifa and like Proud Boys fight and watching Antifa just get nailed in the head?
Yeah,
and just like, you deserve it. That felt so justice. Like it felt like such justice to watch them get nailed. Do you ever get that?
Yeah,
Like, did you watch that? And like,
yeah, like I think like the thing that gets me with the whole situation is the fact that like, and we spoke about this yesterday. It's like, I think where I'm at, just as a believer, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus Christ, like, I think it's a challenging place to kind of navigate, like, what is kind of the right way to react? What is the right way to respond? Like, do we just withdraw completely and become totally uninformed on anything that's happening in the news? Do we latch on to every news thing so that we can be a better informed voter? Like, there's such a continuum of, like how do we do this? Because I feel like the Bible isn't maybe necessarily, and maybe this is, this could be wrong. I just my take, but like maybe it's not overly prescriptive in terms of like how, like where we land on these things, right? And so for me, I think the thing that that I've become sensitive to is the fact that, like I know a few things to be true, and I try to hold onto those pillars. And like one of the things I know is that, there are many people that I disagree with fundamentally in terms of their politics or in terms of their lifestyle choices and those sorts of things. But I do know that at the end of the day, like as a believer, as a Christian, follower of Jesus Christ, like I know that at the end of the day, regardless of what they believe or how they choose to live, they are someone that is created in the image of God. And they deserve my respect and my love unconditionally. On the other side of that, though, the challenge I think is that I wrestle with is that, okay, so those things can all be true, but simultaneously it's like, I see in the scriptures like a vision for society that's laid out that that is different than the way that society lives today. And I feel as though like my responsibility as a citizen in this beautiful country, it is my responsibility to vote and kind of align myself with that which brings us closer to what I see is laid out in Scripture. And to me, what I see laid out in Scripture is, in some sense, it's like the secret blend for like, max joy, max prosperity. And I know there's a lot of people that would disagree with me, that would hold a different view than I would. I know there's a lot of people that would say that America is not a Christian nation, and we ought not to be a Christian nation. Like we ought to be, free to decide whether we want to be Islam, whether we want to be atheist. And I would say you're free to make those decisions, but I believe in faith, because I don't know for certain, but I believe in faith, that, it's in our best interest that the society kind of line up with, the Word of God. And so this is a bit of a tangent to respond to what you're saying, but when I see like, the, I guess the desire to want to like that justice of like, it's like, I have to be able to hold multiple thoughts simultaneously. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm holding that thought of, I don't agree with this other side, but I also have to be like, I love them too. And I want what's best for them. And that may sound arrogant, like I've got the secret way. And that's kind of how I've been responded to, I think, in the past. Like people have responded to me in that way. And to that, I would just say, all of us have our own opinion of how it's supposed to be done. So this is just mine, right? And mine is backed by thousands of years of scripture that's been written, that, the number one, like, most published book in the history of mankind, has a few things to say about how we ought to, like, live our lives and order ourselves. So, yeah, I would say, like, to rewind a little bit, when you talked about just the initial response to Trump getting shot in the ear, it was like, just like you, I mean, I was in tears. I mean, I was really shook up. And even when it would play again, I'd be scrolling through Instagram or something, and it would just pop up. Someone would make a video about it. It's almost like this visceral, like, you're just like, whoa. I don't know. It's like you're just freaking out. Like, I don't know. It's like triggering almost for me. It's like watching, like, a traumatic moment, and it's like in my brain, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to, like, I'm sure I'll get over it, but it's like, I don't know if I'll be able to ever, like, not have that visceral reaction to it. And I think the moment, obviously, that was, like, the most impactful was just the way that he fought those Secret Service agents to stand up, to show his supporters that, he's not dead. And he, like, pumps that fist and he yells, "Fight, fight, fight." And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like,
What a response.
oh man.
I've been around gunfire. It's one of the scariest things, not knowing where it's coming from. The one time I kept thinking about was when I used to live next door to a drug dealer, and I've talked about this before. People would shoot up his house. They would shoot up my block sometimes. And not too long after I moved in there, we heard gunfire going on, and I immediately, my instinct was to drop to the floor. It was like my legs literally gave up. And I was right by a window, and I remember lifting up the blind, and I see a guy literally running, like, a couple houses down, running towards, like, the direction of my house, like my side of the street. And he's just got, like, his gun aimed behind him, and he's just pop, 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 pop. And I see him start to grab his leg, and he gets hit in the thigh. He's just bleeding down my street. And I'm like, oh my God. It was so freaking scary. Like, it wasn't cool. Like, he didn't look like he was having, like, some badass, like, thug moment. It looked like he was probably the scaredest he's ever been in his life. Like, I know that sounds normal, but whatever. But until you see it face to face, it's almost like a very surreal thing. I've only ever seen it, like, in movies.
Yeah.
It's always portrayed as, like, they're always making that guy look like a badass, or the way he's running away, or the way people are walking away from explosions. But, like, to actually see it and see that that's one human being trying to end the life of another human being. And it's not like a protection or a justified or a righteous move in this case. Is very savagery to watch.
Totally.
And it's terrifying. And as soon as I saw that, I mean, what I just described happened, like, within seconds. To have active gunfire coming down, and you have the chance to run or just hit the deck or whatever, and, like, watching that crowd not move,
It was incredible.
I didn't understand it until listening to the RNC speech when Trump, and I was expecting him to, like, really, like, with total lack of humility, be like, they love me, they wouldn't move, they wouldn't leave their king, and whatever way he would say it. But no, it was like
he sounded almost like he almost sounded like a changed man in some sense.
Dude, it was
he had
bizarre.
face to face with death. I mean, I was going to say, like,
well, one thing specifically that he said that really clicked for me, and I was like, I think that was it, and I don't know how people are going to feel about it, but I think he at least nailed it, was that he said they didn't want to leave me. Yeah. And it wasn't like in an arrogant sense. It was like you could hear the emotion in this man. The fact that I have not seen him publicly break down and cry of, like, humility with the things he's dealing with and talking about, like, I can't comprehend. I feel like I'm a strong individual, a strong husband, and, like, somebody that can protect my family. But just watching the way this man's he's on a different level. Like, there's something about certain people that are just built differently.
Yep.
And the fact that, fight or flight, like, a lot of that is not, like, I had to learn that sometimes for me, like, I have froze in certain scenarios. And it took me years to realize that I wasn't, at fault for things that have happened to me because of my reaction.
Sure.
There's things that are just out of your control, and it's just who you are, right? And I've come to terms with that. So to watch a man like that, stand. And this is like a businessman, a politician. He's not a soldier. He wasn't trained for this stuff.
No.
Half the time when he talks about guns, he sounds just as stupid as the other politicians with the fully semi-automatic, right?
Yep.
Standing up under that circumstance and knowing what was going on, didn't know where the shooters were, and then his crowd standing there and not wanting to leave him. I felt it. I was like, that is it. They didn't want to leave him. That's their leader. Like that's the man. They all have so much hope and trust in this man. And they, I have a friend that I remember he so on several occasions he has said, like, Trump doesn't care about you. Like, he's nothing like you. The life he lives is different than you. And I think that's really sad. I feel like he's missing one of like the greatest moments that I'm experiencing politically and in this country. And maybe I'm a sucker. Maybe we're all suckers, who feel this way. But I feel so deeply that as much as Trump loves himself, which I know he does.
He does.
I think he truly loves, and I mean loves, passionately loves and cares for the American people and especially his base.
I think he does. I mean, I would say that...
I think it's extremely sincere.
Yeah, like the thing that's interesting about that moment was that at that point in time, unless the whole thing is rigged and it's a setup, which I don't buy it.
I don't even want to like venture out. That has
buy it.
made me so infuriated the way that people are describing
it's
it.
like
Like with the blood packs that he's pulling out. I'm like, you guys are out of your mind.
The fact that someone like died and the fact that we have like the image of the bullet, you know, whizzing by, but which to me is like just such a, it's like that's a closed case. But the fact that he can't know at that point in time that he's out of danger fully, like he might know, and I think he probably knows that the counter sniper took out the assassin or the attempted assassin, but he doesn't.
Well, we heard everything that was said. You can hear the Secret Service. Nobody said shoot her down. Nobody said anything like that.
Okay,
he's not wearing an earpiece. He had no idea.
There you go. So I just think that
they might have been told that, but they didn't repeat that. You know what I mean?
That could the fight could be. I mean, in an alternative universe where there is another sniper or assassin, like that could be his final words in that moment.
I didn't even think about that.
Which is kind of wild to think about. I mean, that could be his send off to the American people. And it's like to think about that is just, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, say what you will about the man. I mean, he showed bravery in that moment. He showed bravery that I frankly admire. And, I think there are many people. I think why there's so much boost in the polls now after that assassination attempt, which we've seen historically. Reagan, was in 1981. There was an attempted assassination attempt on Reagan's life. Which, interestingly enough, where I'm from in Williamsburg, Hinckley, his family is from there.
You said that's the man that shot him,
The
right?
man that, and he's actually released, and people see him in Williamsburg walking around.
What? I would feel like that's like you're done, like a political assassination attempt.
He didn't kill him. Like Reagan, I think, had some injuries. I think there were some stray bullets that.
Do you know where he got hit?
No.
Okay. So I found this out just because of everything that happened with Trump. I didn't know how serious it was. Like that he almost died.
With Reagan?
Yes. So for those of you that haven't seen the video, Reagan's like walking down the street. You hear, I think, 6 shots go off very fast. And then Reagan disappears from the camera and you see these guys. I don't even know where they pulled them from, but everybody's got like these submachine guns, like it looked like either Uzis or Mac 10s, Mac 11s, like these very compacted guns, and everybody's like looking around, and you see like the shooter, you can't even see him. He's got multiple people on top of him, and you hear one guy go, "You son of a bitch!" Right?
It's like dogpile.
Like yeah. But I guess they moved so quickly. Like they had him going towards his vehicle. He was right before he entered his vehicle, and I guess they opened up the door to shove Reagan in the back, and the bullet hit the door, ricocheted underneath of his arm and pierced his lung.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I mean, this is what people were saying. They were saying that it was said at the time that had they not been so close to the hospital they brought him, that it's very likely he wouldn't have survived. I don't know how true that is. But I didn't realize like how serious that was. I mean, getting shot is serious, but like life-threatening, a lot of people get shot and it's not always life-threatening. Anyway, I'm just surprised I wasn't taught that
Sure.
more. Yeah, I just didn't know. There was so much I didn't know about it, and I didn't realize that was before his election, and that the numbers that boosted up afterwards. I
The
mean,
numbers boosted significantly, and I
yeah.
think
like nationwide.
nationwide.
Yeah.
And I think in the case of Trump, like, the way that he responded in that moment, I mean, people have said it. We're not saying anything new here. He just, people say this, that it can't be taught. Like you just mentioned, I mean, there's a fight or flight response, and he chose fight. And he literally said it. And how incredible is that? I mean, because I think that, for those that maybe were on the fence, or maybe those that doubt Trump, the fact that the man chose fight, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anyone really pegged him to be the fighter. I mean, we've seen it, but like that's a different level. It's one thing to fight Hillary Clinton on a debate stage. It's another thing to be like in the midst of like fire.
I've associated most of his like quick wit of like he's got what comedians have.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear comedians riffing back and forth, I've just always taken him as like very witty, very quick, and like taken him as somebody who's probably riffing a lot behind the scenes because that's a skill in and of itself.
Yeah.
But now looking back at all of these little quick clips and stuff, there is something maybe to be said of linking that to like the way he reacted of like, yeah, I think he's always been a fighter. And Dana White in the RNC was talking about that. And I didn't realize they've known each other for so long. I think he said like 25 years or 20 years.
Yeah.
And that guy is not somebody that's just going to say something for the sake of it. And he was talking about what a fighter Donald Trump is. And he's like, the rest of the world saw what a lot of us have seen, for 15, 20 years.
And just that iconic photo.
Oh
can
my
we talk about that?
Gosh, dude.
The
Like,
Pulitzer Prize winning and the photographer that, again, like Trump, doesn't know the outcome here. Doesn't know if the shooter's down or anything.
did you watch his body cam
He
footage?
just has the bravery to like hold the line and like get that photo. And I mean, that photo is like phenomenal. It's incredible. Like that is an amazing photo. Like we will never forget it.
No.
Oh my goodness. It's like going to be in like, I mean, in American history, I mean, it will define like a generation.
Absolutely.
It's like
Absolutely.
9/11 and then like the Trump assassination. I mean, I don't know what's in between. I mean, that's incredible.
Our generation, I used to learn about past generations, and you think, wow, like you learn about your grandparents, and like, wait, they were alive for that. Wow, they were alive for Pearl Harbor, World War II, and this, and then like, wow, they lived through a lot, and I always thought like, thank God that stuff's over. But now you start looking, and I think just human nature, there's tragedy that just comes. It's part of life, and I think every generation, probably even before like what we can record or that we know about, or I can tell you about right here. I guess every generation really has a lot of these defining moments where, things could have really went north or south.
Totally.
And I think this, even 9/11, I don't feel like the country was in as much danger as we were or would have been had the assassination attempt taken place.
Yeah, I mean,
been successful.
I might push back on you a little bit there. I definitely feel like an attack on U.S. soil of that magnitude.
Oh, I'm talking about the danger of the American people. Like we were attacked at that point. Like we united in that moment. I'm saying like I guess I'm thinking specifically like Civil War, like because after that there was so much division, that followed after the uniting. Or maybe I didn't say that correctly, but post that moment, I guess we felt like we were in danger. Mm-hmm. But looking back, I mean, nothing really happened. I wasn't afraid of my neighbors. Some people might have been freaked out. I remember a lot of Arab or Muslim looking people were getting the police called on them.
I remember
say something.
I remember like flag sales like went up through the roof.
You saw them everywhere, man. I was like
after 9/11, and I feel like the country was more or less united in a sense, in a way that I don't know that we had been. I mean, I don't even know if the Trump assassination attempt would even be in the same category of like. I don't think we're all united. Like I think that there's still plenty on the left that are, and I don't say that to be mean, but I just think that there still is a skepticism and honestly there's a frustration there that like, I mean, they can't be that thrilled with their candidate. I mean, they've expressed as much.
I mean, the people I know that voted for him the first time, they don't like him. They don't care about him. They're not passionate about him.
But it wasn't so much him as it was not Trump.
That's what I'm saying.
And I think that strategy is starting to kind of wear thin now, going into like round 2 of Biden, where it's like, you know, I mean, I don't know if anyone's excited to vote for Trump, but I just don't know if they're going to get the turnout that they got last time for Biden because of the never Trumpers.
I think if the country wasn't doing so poorly economically, I think the people that voted for him the first time wouldn't care if he was like being drug or, Weekend at Bernie's, drug out on stage.
Yeah, if it was working, if what they were saying was working and we had evidence of that.
I just mean not this bad.
Yeah.
Which I'm only basing that because on the fact that the several people that I talked to, back in 2020 who voted for him are telling me this time around, they're still voting for him.
Sure.
They'll vote for whoever. It's just still not Trump. And there's some people that just cannot see it. And I guess I don't think everybody is like, hey, you have to love Trump at this point. But the reasoning behind it, I don't fully understand at this point.
Yeah.
From their explanation, I've heard nobody come out and tell me that they didn't like his policy.
Yeah, he proved himself.
I don't like this. I didn't like that. It's just like, I don't like him. He's a liar. He's colluding with Russia. He's a puppet. And I'm like, guys, like, do you follow anything? Or are you just literally getting your news off of memes? I mean, almost everything I get sent from these people, I love to disprove what they send me through their media outlets. Mm-hmm. And almost every single thing they send me, like major against him, it'll be like a CNN article or like, that it stemmed from their meme that they sent me or the little. And then I'll just go to CNN and be like, hey, here's where a couple years later they disproved that, or here's where they had to retract that, or here's the full story. Read the article, not the headline, because whenever a question is asked in a headline, like the rule of thumb is the answer is no, right? The clickbait is to get you in because you want to know if the answer is yes, but the answer is no. And you can pretty much follow that, to the article, to almost every article to a T. I still like to read them and find out. But, I just skip to the bottom so I don't have to read, and spend 5 minutes giving them ad revenue. I skip to the bottom and get the answer immediately.
I just want to say this.
Media sucks right now.
Dude, I just want to say this. So, in 2016, I did not vote for Donald Trump. I don't even think I voted, honestly. I got super involved in politics. Like I actually was on the I was making phone calls for Obama in 2008.
Were you like very political, or were you just kind of doing that?
I just want the record to show
at that moment
for the audience.
Yeah,
I want the record to show that I've gone on a journey, politically speaking, and it wasn't like I was a born and bred conservative. Although I will say I was heavily influenced to conservative way, Republican way, by my grandpa, and then my mom. For a number of years as a child, I still remember growing up listening to Rush Limbaugh.
Nice.
I remember, it's kind of one of those awkward memories, but I remember once making like a song that was, it was making fun of Bill Clinton back when that was like the thing. They would take like a mainstream song and they would like change the words. They would make fun of like Bill Clinton or the Democratic Party. But, I rebelled pretty heavily in high school, and we'll talk about my testimony a little bit, I think. But I really embraced, I think, a more kind of liberal, Democrat, progressive kind of way of thinking for a number of years in high school. Really desired to be a hippie, and in fact grew my hair very long and wore flowered shirts, and did a lot of psychedelics. So, I mean, I checked all the boxes. Played music. I was in a band. I had a big van. Played shows and stuff. But with that, it was interesting. I made phone calls for Obama, and then I was like, I liked aspects of the Democratic Party, but what I didn't like was, I felt like there was a lot of control. And so I actually from there went really hard into, libertarianism, like really hard. Like that's when I became very, very, very passionate. I remember Ron Paul Revolution, Ron Paul Revolt. Do you remember that? And,
I don't remember that specifically.
So that was 2008. Or was it 2012? It might have been 2012 actually. I'm trying to remember. Someone in the listener is going to know. It might have been 2008. I really liked Ron Paul. but he was kind of a more libertarian leaning conservative. And I used to go to libertarian meetings in Seattle. Like I would show up there, and I was like by far the youngest guy. And they looked at me and they're like, "Wow, he's got energy. You should run as a libertarian candidate." And I'm like, "What? So I can just lose? You know, like no one votes libertarian, dude. Like it's a joke." So got really into that, and then at some point, it was funny because like all they really cared about there at the libertarian thing was like, we got to get weed legal, we got to get all the drugs legal. Like that's all we got to do, and it'll all be fine. So it was kind of a weird dynamic there. And I even held signs for Gary Johnson, maybe. Do you remember that?
He's just the weed guy in my mind.
That was
my
like
memory.
2012, and it was like, gotta get weed legal. Holding signs for Gary Johnson, man. Gotta get weed legal. And then fast forward, and you know, I come back to the faith, but also like I was libertarian when I came back to the faith, but it was like getting married and like having kids and like, you know, there's all those, what is that quote? There's a funny quote about that of like, if you're not Republican by the time you're like 30 or 40 or
I forget
something.
the exact thing, but it's you're not, this is totally wrong, but the idea is if you're not left in your youth, you have no heart, and if you're not conservative in your older age, you have no brain.
Correct.
That's not it, but that's the sentiment.
And so for me, it was like the whole concept of like, you know, like free market capitalism, which has its problems. Okay. So I feel like I have a more reasonable approach. I just think it's the best choice
That's where I stand.
given the circumstances that we're in.
Yeah.
Like we have no other choice because like I believe humans, and this is another, you know, hot take, we're inherently evil. Even though we have the capacity to do good things, and we see that all the time, we still see a lot of bad. And as good as things get, we still see people that decide to go the other way. And so the fiscal policy of republicanism is intriguing. And then now the idea of legislating morality, which is really the hot button issue that people don't like. People push against it. And I understand why, as humans, we push against that. Because it's like, why would I want someone to tell me what to do or what not to do? Like we all have that in our bent, like in our nature, is that pushing against the rules. And, you know, as an analogy, and this might be, I don't know if this is a fair analogy or not, but it's one that just comes to mind is so like, if I use the analogy of like the legalizing drugs, for instance, you know, you want all drugs legal, libertarian? And I'm not saying that everybody wants this, but this is just kind of like take this to its nth degree. Like, okay, let's legalize fentanyl. Let's legalize heroin. Let's legalize some of these like really powerful drugs. Okay, you have the freedom to do that, but at what point does your freedom to do that drug inhibit my freedoms? Because when you're on the street and you shoot that fentanyl, and my heart goes out to you, sir, who does that. Like I feel really, really, really bad that you're in that situation and that you've put yourself in that place. So I want to like communicate the empathy there piece side to it. But it's now my tax dollars, and it's now, you know, potentially your life. Like my tax dollars that have to get you to the emergency room so that they can treat you and get you back stable from overdosing. But then on the other side of the coin, it's also like, what is the net result of that person on society? It's like, are they improving? Are they helping one another? You know, helping us be a better version of ourselves, of our society? Or are they, in a sense, a drain on society? And I know it sounds callous and hard, but it's like, that's why we can't legalize that drug. And I'm not saying that, like, again, I know that that's an extreme example.
I think what you're saying sounds absolutely logical.
It's logical.
For a long time, I thought legalize every drug. I forget what country did it, and has, from my understanding, been very successful. Like crime went way down. They had, you know, the drugs were all available. You'd be able to get them for free, and they were, you know, the place where you'd go would also offer like clean needles, things like that. But they would also offer like therapy, job placement, and getting you off of these drugs. And I used to look at that and be like, man, like that's the answer. That's all we need. But watching how it's been implemented in, where is it? Colorado? Or San Francisco. Where is it that all drugs are legal right
Oregon,
now?
I think.
Or like a lot of them.
Oregon, I think, is repealing it, but I think they had it.
Okay, but
for sure.
you look at that, or even New York City. You see where it's not that it's legal, but they're just not stopping or enforcing anything, against it. And you watch what's happening, and it's like I don't know all of the factors involved, but obviously it's not working out the same way as these other countries, either because it was more well thought out over there, and we just jumped towards the final step, which was making it legal without preparing for that. I don't know, or maybe it's our society, but there's a lot of differences between one country to another. Like our morals are different, our reaction to things are different. Like, yes, we're all human beings and we have similar things to us,
Yeah.
but there is a lot that's very different. And it's like to try and implement something just equally and expect the same outcome without trying to curtail it to that society just felt a little, I don't know, careless.
Sure.
So I still don't have, I almost feel like the guy who's like, well, socialism would work if we did it right. Like but at the same time, it's like, it's just so dangerous. I see the way it turned out and I've completely changed my mind on it. Like the people that robbed my house or broke into our car, broke into the bag on my motorcycle when I lived in the city, like these weren't people that were doing well in life. Like people that are doing these drugs, it's usually not because they want to enhance their already happy life. And a lot of these drugs, they're used to cover up problems. It's not like they're just going on their psychedelic journey. Like we're talking about heavy drugs. What follows that, you can't hold down a job for very long doing things like that. So you still need money. You have to pay for these drugs. So you resort to criminal activities. It's like, I also, like you said, I have a heart for these people. I've been in those positions. I understand how quickly things can just flip on their head and you lose control. And that's why I do believe there should be things in place. And I think, looking at it from a more logical standpoint of just what is the net benefit or positive versus negative in society from that individual, I don't think that's heartless. I think that's having a heart. You're not. It's like instead of it's like, oh, let's just dismiss millions for like a couple thousand. It's like, no, those millions are important too. And if they're being affected or aren't able to safely walk through New York City at night, maybe we have a problem here. Maybe having a heart doesn't mean just giving somebody what they want when they are having a hard time.
Sure.
Similar to like the transgenderism. Like when somebody's having a hard time or an identity issue, like when I was having identity issues as a kid, they weren't, my sexuality or, my gender, but nobody came forward and was like, hey, that depressive feeling of feeling like you're worthless, like it's totally true, you are worthless. And like, we're going to support you in being this worthless individual. Like, that's kind of like how I look at it. It's like you're just pushing something that is not going to help that person out. And I think the same thing with the drugs. I don't really understand where I stand yet. I'm still thinking about it, but watching certain areas in the country start to implement it or just stop enforcing it. Because I used to think, well, the only reason those people are criminals is because we're making it criminal what they're doing. And it's like, it's just so much deeper. It's such a young, juvenile way of thinking about it. Having a family changes your thoughts.
It really changes your thoughts. It really
does.
And you realize just how, you realize, I think you come to terms and come to grips with just how, just a bad decision in a moment of weakness can just completely alter the trajectory of your life. And so like that decision to smoke heroin because it seemed like a good idea, and my favorite musicians do this when I'm 19 or 18 or whatever, quickly leads to, well, now I got to inject it because I'm not getting that. I'm not riding the dragon like I need to. I mean, I need to really ride the dragon. And from there, it's like, hook, line, and sinker, and you're toast. And I mean, there are people that beat it, but man, that is a brutal one. And I haven't lived that experience, but I've been around a lot of people that have. One of my really good buddies in high school was, he was a user. He was a heroin and meth addict. I mean, he was mixing the two and going on some pretty crazy things. And like, he grew up in such a broken home, and like my heart goes out to the guy. Like, I love the guy. I mean, I actually wrote him a letter, while he was in prison. I mean, he got into a standoff with the police and stuff. I don't want to reveal his name or anything, but he, yeah, like I really love this guy a lot. I really care about him. He was a really good friend, and I tried to show the love of Christ to this guy unconditionally. But we played music together. Super funny guy, just great personality. But you can just see how like drugs just robbed him, and like I don't know if legalizing or making them illegal is really going to make the difference in terms of like access to it or not. I mean, there's a lot of arguments about that. I only use this example to just say that like I think that they're like to be a Republican, in my opinion, is obviously being conservative in fiscal policy, but also it has to do with like the concept of putting up these guardrails from a morality standpoint, knowing that it's in our human nature to kind of push the limits at times, and sometimes we do something inadvertently, not realizing that like this is going to take over our life. And I think that when the consequences are greater, I think that there might be a little more like clear-mindedness and sobriety in terms of how you approach things. Like there are countries, and granted, they're different cultures, and so like use the analogy of like Portugal or one of those where everything's legal. I forget which country it is.
I couldn't
in
remember.
Europe. I think it's like Portugal or something. I forget. It's somewhere over in Europe. But then on the flip side of that, you've got like Taiwan, where it's like, if you spit chewing gum on the ground, it's like they're going to beat you with rods. And it's like, I would just have to, and I'm not saying we need to be Taiwan, okay? So don't mishear me. But like, I would think though that that if you're chewing Bazooka Joe in Taiwan, you're probably thinking twice before spitting it out on the ground, knowing that like you're going to face the rods. Right?
Wait, are you thinking of what is that? I don't think it's Taiwan you're thinking of.
Isn't it the island of Taiwan? Yeah, I think it is.
I can't remember. There's some other place I'm thinking about where it's
China
like
or
everything
Japan?
you do is like, or if drugs in general,
Yeah.
is like massive no. Like,
Oh yeah.
you will do.
Well,
serious
there's places,
jail time.
and it's like interesting that like
it's some Asian country.
like,
that I'm thinking
and
about.
I'm not saying that like in the United States, like we need to become this authoritarian, thing. I'm just saying that like maybe we should be more open to that if we want to be more that way, like if we want the results, right? Because what you can't deny is that some of these cultures in these countries, and some of it is cultural, and I don't know how much that weaves into it too, because I do think that as Americans, like I'm married to a German, so that's something we could talk about too. That's interesting because my wife is amazing and she's German. But I see like the differences in the cultures, right? And there is something in the American spirit, which is like a giant middle finger to the law. Like, screw you. You will not tell me what to do. I am an American. I am a cowboy. And I have spurs on my boots. Like, there's something about us that we just really resist authority. Like, we were a country built on resisting authority. Like, it's that there's this weird spirit in us, Like the joke that my wife always says is like, there's a commercial or something where you have the American and the German, and they're both walking to the airport, right? And it's like there's a sign that says like wet floor, and you're watching the Americans just one by one just walk and slide. And they're falling and they're slipping and they're going all over. And then you have the Germans, and they're just like reading the sign and like studying it and then like walking around, and it's like they're so focused on it, And we laugh about it, and at times we even mock it. But it's like there's actually something really cool about that. Like they get it, like they like when you create a new rule in Germany, it's like like they're thinking about it. Like in America, we're like, screw that.
Absolutely, every single one I hear.
Like you give me a new rule, it's like, heck no. So I understand like when we talk about like legislating morality, I get how that like I see the counterpoint to that. I just think that fundamentally, like people today don't go to church like they did 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Like we don't go to church, okay? And it's not even that we go to other churches. Like, take your pick. Muslim, Mormon, whatever you want to be. Like, take your pick. Because at least any religion has at least built into it some semblance of like a moral structure of like, you don't do this. You do these things, you don't do these things. I think Christianity is the best choice of them all. I'm a little biased because I am one. But I think those things help kind of keep people on the straight and narrow, as it were. And it means the government does not necessarily have to pick up the slack there because religion's doing its job.
I felt for a long time that where religion is now lacking in this nation, government has stepped in.
Yeah.
And is, for me, probably the last choice I'd want to step in its place, but it's what we have.
That's what we have.
You know?
And I just don't think it's a good choice either. Like, I would much rather people just go to church and learn to love their neighbors. I'm not saying you're not loving your neighbors, listeners, but it's like, come on.
Yeah, but
Church,
we are.
Church has a way of doing that. It has a way of instilling in you week in and week out this reminder that, like, hey,
it's a reset. I feel like every Sunday is a reset of
every Sunday's a reset
of the way my past week is. Where my past week has brought me.
And you have someone standing, which and saying things from a book that's been around for a long time, that, in my opinion, has a lot of significance
and a lot of proven results.
Proven results, and they're challenging you to be thinking like, hey, you don't get to just stay where you are. Like, as a Christian, you don't get to just stay where you are. Like, God is trying to do something to challenge you all the time. And if you're not listening, if you don't feel that voice of him challenging you, then you're probably not listening hard enough, because there's something in your life right now that he's probably asking you to either give up or something that he's probably asking you to start doing. And it's like, that's what the purpose of church is. And I know it's not pretty. I know it's not sexy. And if I could just give you my 2-minute plug on like why you should go to church, like it's so beautiful. I mean, it's God's way of building in community. They're broken places. I've been hurt by churches. I've been deeply wounded by churches. People that I really cared about disappointed me, and it crushed me. It totally devastated me. And the wounds of that have not fully healed. And I still harbor bitterness that I'm not proud of and that I want to be gone. But at the end of the day, like, I know that is not reflective of God. I know that he is good. And I know that, and I believe that. I think that's an important distinction to make, is that there's a faith component there. Like, I trust that God is good. I believe that God is good. I choose to believe that God is good. And the purpose and the value of church is that, like, God has created a place where we can have community with one another. And I can't believe just how many people are so alone. In 2024, like, we are so alone. And we're so isolated. And it's like, it hasn't always been this way in human history. Like, there was a time when most people went to church. And I know that created problems of its own. I know that there's judgment in churches. People feel judged. I know that it's messy. But I think that we are called to deal with those challenges, because I think they refine us. They make us better as people. Like, people say, like, well, I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to go back to church. Church hurt me. And it's like, you know what? Church hurt me too, but I'm still going back. I'm still choosing to go back. I think that's really, really, really important. I think that when you reach out your hand and it gets slapped, you get conditioned to, like, I don't want to put my hand back out there. And it's like, I don't think the point of life is, like, he who wins is he who doesn't, have any wounds. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, I think the Bible is pretty clear that, like, you're born into a fallen world, and it's like saddle up, partner. Because, like, there's going to be pain. But it's like, which pain do you want to choose? Because at the end of the day, you're choosing just choosing a different pain by not being involved in church, by not, like, meeting with those people. Yeah, you're avoiding that pain. But it's like, you can't tell me that the pain of isolation, the pain of aimlessness, like, you're choosing a goal, right? Like, you have a goal in your mind. If I just achieve that, if I just accomplish that, if I just do that. And it's like, okay, like, what does that mean? Like generations from now, like that goal that you have that you're so fixated on, that car that you want, that house that you want, that spouse that you want, whatever it is. And they can be good things, that body that you want, that you're working so hard towards. These are things that I think about. And, one of the big things that really kind of rocked my world is, I was thinking about the fact that because I went on like such a quest for like pursuing different things, pursuing like wealth, like insane wealth through like trying to do real estate stuff, other pursuits. And the thing that I think like really challenged me is this like weird idea of the memory of me dies with my grandkids. And that was like a really like sobering thought to me, because it made me realize like, yeah, I have this life to live, but it's like interesting. Like really the most impactful thing that I can do in this life is how am I pouring into my kids, and not just like trying to set them up financially, but like, how am I like loving them well so that, hopefully, and there's no guarantees because we've all seen it. We've seen kids that have received incredible love from incredible parents that have gone the other way because we're human, which I think validates the Christian, angle of like, we're all, wicked, we're all fallen. But it's like, if I have any control over like the success that my kids have in this life, which success is not them getting some fancy degree. Success is not them being perfect or doing everything just, making no mistakes. For me, like success is them loving the Lord and then passing that on well to their next generation. Absolutely. And then so on and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. And so that to me like really reshifted like my whole focus, because I was so fixated at one point on, make all this money, do all these real estate deals, go, build this giant thing that I can then pass on to my kids. And then they'll have this big thing that they can pass on. And then it's just going to go bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're going to be the Rothschilds. We're going to be the Rockefellers. Not really, but my point is like you start realizing like that's just such an aimless pursuit. At the end of the day,
it's a very shallow one that can crumble in a moment. It's like that versus something that's deeply ingrained and in the raising of a child. You don't deeply ingrain a business or a structure that you build, but you can deeply ingrain an ideology, a set of morals, a way of life, through examples, through teaching, through whatever's influencing them or allowed to be influencing them, as long as you can when you can control it.
Totally.
Yeah, it's always been interesting to me because you watch like even in my service work, I'll hear about different companies we'll work with, and then they pass it on to their kid, and then the place just totally changes, and it's like you can't pass on your mind and the way you handled that company. So you're going to pass it on to a mind that is not going to fit the same way. And even the companies that have been successful, I've been through like one company in particular where it was a very rocky moment of just watching, and I watched the the older generation really let them screw up and find their way, but also be there if it got too rocky. But it's a messy ththing. It's very different than like what you were talking about. Like
what I think of it as is like, someone once said, and I remember, I'm going to butcher this quote, but it's like, the gist of it is that, like for weight training, weight training is special and unique because as an achievement, like when you do a great job of weight training and you've got this beautiful physique to show for it, like it's truly like something that like there's a level of achievement and pride in that quite honestly and literally money cannot buy, because there's no shortcut. I mean, you can juice and whatever, but even the guys that juice, it's like you can't just juice and like do nothing. Like you have to juice and like get in the gym and like actually do the work. Okay. And so over time, you know, you're lifting bigger and bigger and bigger weights, right? You're improving. I think of the analogy of when you have a massive amount of wealth and you pass it on to your kids, like it's the equivalent of handing your kid and saying, okay, now you've never bench pressed in your life. You know, you're 5'6", you weigh 130 pounds. Good luck with this 225 pound, you know, loaded barbell. It's like, good luck with that. It's like you're giving them this massive thing that they simply did not work for. It took years.
They're not conditioned.
They're not conditioned for it. Exactly. And so it's like you said, I mean, it's amazing how quickly, fortunes like that can just dissolve.
Absolutely.
Really fast.
Yeah.
So it's a really bad pursuit, in my opinion. I think that ideally, and I haven't written a formal will yet, but that is on my to-do list. I do want to do that. I don't know if you've thought of that. That's a weird thing to think of, but I've thought I need to do this at some point. But I'm sorry, kids. You're not getting a penny. No, just kidding. No, I do think that I want to leave my kids a nice inheritance, but I don't want to leave them something that is like ridiculous. I don't know how big it'll be anyway. I mean, I'm having conflicting ideas about just how much even to put into investments now, because I'm thinking about how much money do I really need? Like starting from the end and working my way back, which is kind of an interesting way to do it, because I feel like a lot of financial advisors and stuff, they have in their, it's like part of their program to get you, like to get in your head, into your psyche, to make you think like you're not going to have enough in retirement. You're screwed. And then you're like dumping more and more and more. And it's like, are you on track? Are you on track? Are you on track? And it's like, it's like, what's interesting is that they have a financial motive for you to give more money to them because that's how they make money, when you give it to them.
Yeah.
And so, I just wonder sometimes, like starting from the end in terms of like, what is that number that I need, you know, and then working my way back and then realizing like, oh, like, you know, we're giving too much or whatever. Like maybe I need to back off a little bit. You know what I mean?
So for me, like, I'm not in a place where I'm thinking at all about like leaving my kids with some financial gain. Like that's just not in the cards for us. We're getting by. I mean, we're doing well. Like I'm not, you know, but it's not.
I saw what you bought at that Italian place earlier. So the inheritance is.
I'm spending it on cheese.
It's going right to our
cheese
it's
and
going to our
balsamic
bellies,
vinegars.
Dude, we spent way too much money. For the record, Carmen spent over $70 at a cheese shop.
It was 65.
Yeah, I know. Oh gosh, I spent a fair amount too, though. It was such good.
It's your fault. You ordered prosciutto. I saw them cutting it, and they were about to take it off, and I was like, "Hey, before you take that off, I'll take the same amount that he got." Because
dude, it was $40 a pound. Did you see that?
Yeah, I usually get the one cheaper than that. I like it a lot more.
You do?
The Daniela.
Oh, so you should have told me.
Why? I don't know.
You should have intervened. No, I bought it, and I was like, well, I'm in Philly, you know. When will I be in Philly again? And I'm with an Italian man. Anyway, I got to get some, got to try it. And it was fantastic. And I actually ate all of your prosciutto, so.
I heard. That's all right. I'll get more.
But I introduced you to the crispy oil.
That was amazing. What was that called again?
Crispy oil, extra hot. Here's your plug. Crispy oil, extra hot.
Shout
out to Noah Gargiulo, who I doubt will listen this far into the podcast because he has an attention span of a flea. But I love the guy to death. I love you, Noah. But
yeah, that was incredible.
But the crispy oil, he literally was like, dude, you got to try this. And he's like, what's your address? I'm going to mail it to you. He's a buddy back home in Seattle, like my best friend back home. Really cool guy. He will be the mayor of Bremerton someday.
There you go.
He's the guy that knows everybody. Italian, runs everything in town. His family owns everything. Just kidding. But anyway, yeah, crispy oil.
The reason I brought that up, though, and I'm going to bring it back to politics, is a lot of my emotional investment into politics, I feel like, is some of my investment into my kids' future. And some people might, not want to be involved or think it's like not worth their time, or they don't want to get into the politics because they see how crazy things are. But for me, it's because of how crazy I think I already see things going and the way the world is going, my investment is trying to fight for a better future for my kids. And I think that's a lot of people. I think that's the reason why Donald Trump got involved to begin with. In fact, I was surprised to hear Donald Trump even said recently, was quoted as saying that after losing in 2020, and this is something you won't hear from the media, but was saying that, I hoped he would do well, referring to Joe Biden. I really hoped he'd done well, but the country is not doing well. It's not doing well. It's actually doing very bad. And he's like, I didn't want to step back in, but I feel like I have to. And I was like, man, all right, you can take that a couple different ways, but I think the man is just looking at what he's leaving behind. I think he knows life is short, not even just from, surviving what should have been death, an assassination, but just in general, he's an older man. You could see the comparison of him versus, his family. He's, even his grandkids are getting older, and seeing what kind of country you're leaving back. And when you have that kind of power or pull to make that decision to a selfless decision to jump into politics this late in life, I have to think that a lot of it has to do with the things we're talking about. Some of it's sure ego and all, but I don't think that was enough to drag him in.
Sure.
And I didn't really fully believe that until hearing that response to, him running again. But I want to get back to about things heating up. I kind of left it off with just talking about how I felt some justice watching people get hit.
Yeah.
But the real point of that was that since this assassination attempt, I know I'm not the only one who got a taste of what a lot of soldiers online or veterans who have seen battle talk about, saying, you don't want this. I hear people calling for it on X, calling for war. And these people that are, battling up and are, getting ready and fighting in the streets, you don't want this. And I would hear it. But just like every child that we're telling, hey, yeah, drugs might be fun at first, but it will get you. It's dangerous. Do not do, these things. Or don't touch that. It's hot. And they have to hurt themselves. I'm glad that we all got a glimpse of it together without having to, with an option. We got a glimpse of it with enough.
We escaped. We escaped.
We weren't forced to stick with it. We have a choice now. We all saw what it could be. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us are pulling back. It's funny, a buddy of mine was sent me a picture of hey, Demolition Ranch, who, the shooter was wearing one of his shirts, and I love Demolition Ranch. I saw that video. And he put out a video saying he doesn't promote violence. My buddy was who's very left, was hey, I saw that thing, but he actually does promote violence. And he made some comments that I okay, maybe. But he sent me this hat, and it said, make politicians afraid again. And my first response was, actually, I love that hat, dude. I've wanted that hat for a while. And, sometimes God really speaks to you. And I just blew that off as it was almost a little bit of an arrogant, come on, dude. All right, your first comment was a little silly, but that, I could not stop thinking about that the following day. Why did I like that hat? Why did I want that hat? Why was I thinking about ordering it after he sent it to me about how ugly it was? And why did I not order it? And there was a little bit of hesitancy. And I think that was the moment where I really started seeing something's changing in me as well. Mm-hmm. The videos that I see popping up on my YouTube of Ben Shapiro owns such a... I don't desire to see that at the moment. I don't want to see somebody get owned, even though I feel like I'm right and they're wrong. Yeah. I don't care about it enough to watch somebody be hurt. Whether it's emotionally, physically. Man, we dehumanized. As not, us on our side, but we as a society.
Yeah, both sides.
Have dehumanized people.
We have.
And it's crazy because we have so many examples in history of what that leads to. And yet we need to touch that stove and burn ourselves. That's what it felt. That's what it feels like. Yeah. And I really am hopeful that we all got a little burned, but we're going to be okay. And know that we shouldn't touch that. That's the best way to put it. I feel like both sides have really... Donald Trump, right before when I was setting this up, I was doing a firmware update on one of the cameras. And I popped open my YouTube, and it was, Donald Trump's first rally after surviving an assassination attempt. Yeah. And I watched the first 3 or 4 minutes. Donald Trump, you hear people chanting about the media or something, and I was waiting for him to be CNN. They're animals. They're filthy. They're liars. Disgusting. Look at him back there. Like, we all were used to that. And we liked that because he really was calling out the bullshit that we have been watching for years. And we all also saw CNN for like over an hour not changing a headline of, former President Donald Trump falls at rally.
Yes.
Former President Trump
Loud popping
removed
noises.
after loud noises. Like, they can say what they want, but they were really, I think they were scrambling at the moment of how to react to it without giving him too much. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was waiting for him to tear into them.
Yeah.
And you know what he said? They covered it fairly.
Yeah.
He said they were fair, and people started getting a little upset. And he goes, "No, for real." He said, "No, really, very fair." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, everything I'm waiting for this man to do,
turned the
like
corner?
what I'm waiting for him to do to give me that like hoorah,
Yeah.
and what other people are waiting for him to do to justify their hatred for him, he's not giving either of us that.
Yep.
And I was like, this is actually the unity, and I know that this isn't going to change everybody. Everybody's not going to be a Trumper at this point. But I really do think that there are very few people that could go through what he did, not only in that moment reaction afterwards, but to come out with this humility, with it, what I believe, you can maybe think I'm a fool if you're listening, to be a genuine call for unity.
Sure.
Or just a unifying message. And I heard him say, like, I want to be a president for an entire nation, not half a nation. And I brought that up to somebody, and they, were like, hey, that's kind of like a thing that a lot of people say.
But that's unique for him, though, to say.
Man, yeah, it's
That's
very
not,
unique.
Like, and that's, I think, a thing that I think is
They're not unique, but like odd.
Odd, but like as believers, I think that's something too that we like. I think is something that I feel like is very near to our hearts, is the fact that like we know that God, He judges the heart, and we know that all people have, they're all wired differently, and like watching someone who was so braggadocious for so long, so arrogant, which I'll be honest with you, I mean, I really like Trump for some reason. I just think he's funny. Like, but I also think he does a good job of governing. I think, but he's not free of any criticism for me. I mean, I'm very dissatisfied with how much money he printed in those 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
He printed more money than Obama, not nearly as much as Biden, but like, that is in a sense a sneaky tax on the American public,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is not okay, and I'm not happy about. So he's not perfect in my eyes, but I think like in the way that we see that God is judging our hearts, and we see how like we're not perfect, we're flawed people, we're very in tune with our own weaknesses, but we also see that like we're on that growth trajectory that I was talking about earlier, that what we would call in Christianity we would call sanctification, which is that progression towards like who God intended us to be, because we're not perfect people. And it's like Donald Trump is not a perfect man, but it's like to see like even just little bits of growth there, which I think they're honestly big leaps in the last, like since this moment, I think it was like pretty big. Like as a believer, I think that we pick up on it like instantly. We're like, man, that's so cool, because that's what we want to see. Mm-hmm. Like we get excited when we watch celebrities, come to the faith, and they're like,
we've been seeing a lot of in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's really, really, really exciting. You get pumped up. You're like, man, this is awesome. And then when you see them like improving their life through that, I mean, we're not watching them day and night, whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know how you can go through a near-death experience like he did and not come away a little bit different.
Yeah, but you can come back very bitter.
That's
you
true.
You can come back and say, look what they've done. Look where they've brought the country. They said this for years, and now they're not surprised. Like they want, like he said before, like they're attacking me because they're attacking you. But he could have said like they want you dead too. Like, and there are people who are calling for that. Like he didn't. Like there are different ways he could have been changed. He could have truly become, and like not understandably or like, but he could have been the Hitler type of guy. Like this could have been a really bitter change where he was angered and rallied up people to truly fight.
I wonder how much of this, too, was set in motion even before the assassination attempt, because, like, I mean, if you're on the, I know there were many people that watched the debate
Mm-hmm.
and they were very dissatisfied with the debate. People that, but I will say, like, as a Trump supporter,
I loved it, man.
I thought like what I saw from Trump was a much more calm and subdued version of who we had
That's
seen
what I
in the
loved about it.
past.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there were insults, but it wasn't like what we had seen in other debates, like when he debated Hillary or when he debated Biden back in 2020. I mean, he seemed much more subdued. And we've been saying this for years. And I mean, it's the most common critique of Trump. It's like, I would vote for the man, I would support the man if he would just shut up and get off Twitter. And I feel like, I don't know what happened, but I do feel like going into this election cycle, I just think that, I don't know if he's finally listening to his staffers, people. I don't know what they're called, the people that support him, his team. Like, I don't know if he's listening to them more because, they're obviously probably trying to coach him and be like, hey, man, just tone it down a bit. But, like, he definitely has seemed much more poised and a much more palatable version, which, again, I know there are those that even that version is just still too much. And they can't unsee what they've already seen in the last, however many years he's been on the, I mean, he's been in the spotlight ever since The Apprentice. I'm sure people didn't like him then,
They loved them. When you go back, dude, like
That show lasted for a long time.
his whole family was loved.
Yeah.
Everything changed the moment he ran, and not even originally. It was the moment he said he was running for the Republican Party.
Yes.
Is when I saw the shift.
Which was crazy because I think even when he said that, he was still like a registered Democrat or something. I don't remember that.
He was a lifelong Democrat.
He was a lifelong Democrat. I mean, he was like, he had connections to the Clintons and like Oprah and stuff. And I know, like for me, like the big turning point with him, because I thought he was an absolute buffoon, and I kind of fell into what I saw in the headlines. But I'll never forget, I had a scenario where I was very sick in my tummy. I was supposed to go on a men's retreat with the church, and I had some pho, and it just did not agree with me. And I will not go into the details, but it was a bad, 24 hours with many visits to the jar.
Gotcha.
So you're picking up what I'm laying down.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, loud and clear. And so I had time to kill. I wasn't going on this men's retreat, which I was sad about. And so I had some time on my hands. And I remember hearing a story, reading a story. It was on Reddit or something. And it was like Donald Trump snubs Angela Merkel in like a handshake or something. This is way back in 2016. It's like the most random thing. And at the time I read the article and I'm like, this is totally par for the course. Like, of what I've read up thus far. But that article kind of triggered in me this like weird curiosity where I was like, did he really do what this article is implying he did? Because I'm like, this is weird. Like, who would do such a thing? And anyway, I had all this, time to kill. So what I did is I actually watched the press conference in question or whatever of him being filmed, all 25 minutes of it. And I remember watching the whole thing, and I remember leaving that going, this is like the most like disingenuous like article like I've ever read. Like, he did not do at all what was said that he did. Like, it was like a circumstance where he got up and it was like there was just a missed opportunity kind of thing where it just didn't happen. But it wasn't like this weird like intentional diss that like the article tried to make it sound as. And that was for me like the seed that was planted that made me like, it then started like the doubt of the media at that point. And I started thinking like, what if, here's an idea. What if everything the media says about Donald Trump is not in fact true? And then all of a sudden it became like this weird thing of, let's just do some fact checking. Now, what's frustrating about that is that it took me 20 minutes or 25 minutes or whatever to substantiate a one-line news story clip, right?
Yeah.
And like the simple fact is that few Americans have that, either have that time or desire to use their time to do like a necessary fact check to really validate every single thing. Like, we rely heavily on the news to do that heavy lifting for us, to leave that press conference and to make a statement about it that gives us at least a gist of what happened.
Yeah.
And so the confidence in mainstream media for me, like when Donald Trump says, like, you know, the mainstream media, and he starts saying like what does he say? Like the lies. What is it?
Oh, like fake news?
Fake news.
Yeah.
Yes, there it is. Fake news. He goes, fake news. It's like, huh. Well, in that case, it was fake news. So in this scenario, he's actually telling the truth. So maybe I should follow the guy that's actually saying the true thing. Now, granted, we all know Donald Trump does get political at times, maybe often. There were many lies that were said in the debate between he and Biden.
He also certainly embellishes.
He embellishes like crazy.
But to me, like growing up in the city, like or not growing up in the city, but like being around city people, like that is just like I've always just taken it as like just the way he speaks. He just talks like every crowd is the biggest. You know, it's
the
like
worst.
you know, just but the same thing. Like when I'm talking, it just reminded me like you know I was talking about my mom's meatballs today. We went to Reading Terminal and we had the meatballs. They were amazing by George.
Oh.
And I was like. I just felt like I was bragging about my mom's meatballs. Like they're the best. These are the best meatballs. In fact, this delicious meatball reminds me of my mother's greatest meatballs. And it's like, I know my mother's meatballs aren't the greatest in the world, but it's like if I was in Donald Trump's shoes and said like my mom makes the best meatballs, it's like they're going to say I lied.
Totally.
Like some of the like it gets to a point where I almost want to say like, are we all children here? Like do we not understand when somebody's riffing or you know, like do we not understand a joke or when somebody's embellishing a bit? Like do we really have to have like a fact check on that of like, no, there were actually 5,000 people when he said it looked like there were like almost 10, you know, and it's like, he's a liar. It's like, no, you could say he was wrong. Or maybe there was 8,000 and he said it looked like 10. Well, maybe it did look like 10. There was 8,000. Like this is the kind of lies. It's interesting your perspective on that because my perspective was, you know, whether I was a driver or what I'm doing now, even service work, I'm alone most days and I like it that way. I love being alone at work. I consume about 8 to 9, sometimes like, you know, about 8 or 9 hours a day, I could potentially be consuming something audibly on my headphones. And a lot of it is political. So like when Donald Trump was first, you know, coming on the scene in politics, I wasn't looking at the news for things. I wasn't scrolling through Instagram to get my news. I was listening to live feeds of like a 2.5 hour speech or like multiple speeches. And then I would talk to somebody and be like, did you hear what Trump said? And I'm like, well, what part? I listened to 2 hours of him talking. He said this. I'm like, well, actually, he didn't say that. He actually said this. And I'm like, this is weird. So I was always getting the news straight from the source and then being told that other things were happening. And it's like, were we at the same place? Like, did we listen to the same speech? Like, what are you... And I just saw the manipulation and how they were doing it to not, you know, be sued. It's just weird.
It is weird.
It's very weird. Like, so many things were, like, just clipped. But you know what? It's like... I'd like to see how things are handled from here on out. Because a lot of the complaints and the reasons why they hated him, it's like, you know, a lot of that was his rhetoric and his... You know, almost like this bombastic, like, or what's that word?
Bombastic.
The bombastic, thank you.
Yes.
Just persona, right?
Yes.
And that's what a lot of people hated. They wanted this more stoic Obama
It's not presidential,
figure.
they say.
Yeah.
Which I get that.
Yeah.
I mean, that may be your flavor. I think for me, like, you know, as someone who, I mean, I work in sales and I have a bit of a personality at times. At the end of the day in sales, like, you know, people will tell you that in sales, it's like, if you can get the numbers, if you can prove that you can get the numbers, which honestly, like, you know, I work in medical sales. So, you know, I want to be respectful of the fact that like, you know, it's a soft sale. This isn't like car sales. Okay. Like, you know, there's a person on the other end that we care about deeply. And so, yeah, we want growth, but you know, it's not at the expense of this person. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
They need to get the right equipment, and sometimes my equipment isn't always the best for them. But with that kind of thinking, it's like Donald Trump, like, you know, he delivered many results during his 4 years. If he doesn't talk the way you like, I mean, I get why that could be annoying, but like you have to acknowledge the fact that like for 4 years, our country was in no conflicts around the world. which is something that, and this could be a fact check moment, but I believe you have to go back to the second term of Dwight Eisenhower to find a stretch in American history where we were not involved in some foreign affair or some conflict. And, that's just one achievement that he had that I thought was really impressive. I really liked, is it the Benjamin Accord?
Well, no new wars.
No new wars.
Were started under
him. And I think that was worldwide, globally or something. It was some crazy thing. I mean, I don't want to mess that up, but it was something very significant. I know that there are many politicians that would love if we were in more wars because it's a great way to make money if you're a politician, especially if you got the lobbyists and all that good stuff.
That's one of my biggest driving factors for him.
Well, he doesn't have the incentive. Like, even if he is a power hungry guy, which people say, and I give you that. I mean, but the counter to that to me is that anyone that wants to assume that position of being a president or a CEO or a leader of anything,
absolutely.
They have some side to them that is power hungry. Like, that's what draws them to that position.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that. I don't know that you have that. But that is like one of the prerequisites to wanting to be a CEO or a president. Like, you have to desire to be in a position of power. That being said, how you use that position of power to benefit yourself, to benefit your constituents, to benefit the nation, like, there's a lot of different ways it can go. And we've seen presidents that have been more self-serving and others that I think have been more selfless. And I would just ask anyone that is critical of Donald Trump, how has he been self-serving under those 4 years when he was in office? Like, yes, he had the power. Yes, he was the guy. He was the leader of the free world, whatever. But
I've heard people argue that his family was enriched during that time. And it's like, when I go and look into it, it's like, wow, millionaires were making money. Like, it's not like they became rich then. And you look at what he gave up. He lost a lot of business. He lost a lot of his wealth. And still with the court, all the money he's been told to dish out. I don't know how much of that is if he's appealing it or whatever, but it's just not doing well for him financially and like self-serving. I haven't seen the evidence of that. I've heard people make the argument. I have not seen any evidence myself that shows me that.
I think he can make more money with less energy expended not being the president of the United States. Like,
absolutely.
Like, if his primary goal was simply just to make as much money for him and his family, I think he could accomplish that more efficiently in a different lane.
And I never heard anybody else get that kind of treatment or that kind of scrutiny. I never heard anybody complaining about the Obamas making money.
Or the Clintons.
Or the Clintons. Do you think they're making money because they're super intelligent? Like, is Hillary Clinton such a good speaker that she should be getting millions of dollars? Like, what are you talking about? Shut up. Like,
I know.
I am all about real issues, real concerns, if they're based in logic, fact, or just tell me, hey, the guy rubs me the wrong way. Yeah. I respect that.
Sure.
There are people that are probably great, and they just rub me the wrong way. There's somebody I love and I'm friends with, and Jenny is just rubbed the wrong way by him. And I so want to defend him, but at the end of the day, it's like, okay. Like, whatever.
To each his own.
To each his own, right?
Yep.
And I still love him, and she's fine with that. You know what I mean? But just be honest. Like this, it's really just the lies. I hate the lies. I really hope some of that ends. And I've even seen even the left leaning media in the last week. Things that were said publicly. I was really surprised to see that they weren't all met with like rejoicing and love. Like, a lot of it was met with criticism from their own.
Sure.
And I thought that was really interesting to see. It does feel like in the past week, some serious tides have shifted. And I don't necessarily feel like it was a political win for me, but I feel like it was a nationwide, like, just win.
Yeah.
In the direction we're going, the temperature feels like it's calmed down. I don't, maybe some other people are experiencing differently. Like, I don't know. Like, do you feel like things have heightened anywhere or lessened or what?
I think the gap closes more as we get closer to the election. I think there is right now a huge advantage for the conservative side, the Republican side.
But I mean the anger.
But the anger, yeah, it's hard for me to gauge. I mean, I'll be honest, I've been pretty isolated for the last for the last bit. I mean, that's part of the Virginia woes is just I've got some friends and stuff, but my wife and I, we don't feel like we've really like found our tribe there. And so having those kind of conversations, and like I think, you have conversations with your own people that think like you, and you kind of, it doesn't give you, I don't think, the full picture. Like one of my favorite YouTube channels that I really enjoy like watching is there's a guy that goes on the street, or he goes like on the beach. Like
I did see this.
have you seen this guy? He's got a microphone and he's interviewing people.
Very nonpartisan.
Yeah, and
in his questioning, at
I
least.
think he is probably a Republican.
Oh, I'd imagine. You don't release these clips.
Yeah.
You know.
But he'll ask people like very directly who you're voting for and why do you think, and blah blah blah. And I really don't get the feeling, because it feels like the way that he I think why it feels nonpartisan is the fact that like the responses he gets are not just one thing. They're very mixed. Like, and very balanced. Like it's a very wide range of people and what they have to say. And so he'll get the pro-Trumpers, the really hard pro-Trumpers. He'll get the never-Trumpers, and then he'll get everyone in between. And he'll go on the streets, or it's on the beach of like Santa Monica, like pier or whatever, in California, and like he'll ask, just these questions about like, well, what did you think of the assassination attempt? And he's going through asking all these people and just listening to what they have to say. And it'd be interesting. Like in his situation, he edits the video, so he gets to balance it out and all. But like to be there, to be that person, to hear what people are thinking. And then you just don't know, like if you go to a red area, red state, blue state, like Orange County is actually very conservative, which is kind of a weird thing that a lot of people don't know about California. Like it's like the most registered Republicans, I think, in the United States are like, of all the counties, are in Orange County, which is kind of a weird thing because people think of California as just such a deeply blue state. But so there is a lot of kind of that mix there, I guess. And I don't know that Santa Monica is in Orange County, but again, my geography of that area is kind of blah. I've been there a few times, but my point is, I just don't know, like, to be able to say like what the temperature is. It's a long-winded way of like saying like, I just don't know if it's cooled down at all. Like, I don't know. Do you pick up something different?
It's hard for me to give a good answer on that, which is why I asked, because I have been filled with so much hope for the future of this nation over the survival of Trump.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get into this without sounding like a lunatic. Like, and I really want to make it clear. Like, I know Trump is a human being, and I don't think he's any more than that. I don't like. However, when I'm going through the Old Testament with my kids.
Yes.
And it's rough. Like some of the stuff we read, I'm like, all right, like there's a lot of rape, a lot of like murder, and it doesn't always feel justified. And it's like, all right, like we also understand that the God in the Old Testament is the God of today and tomorrow and forever. And if you believe that, which I do, then I believe that his influence over humanity is also similar or the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going through Kings and Judges, and it's basically like, to me, I'm looking at that as like, all right, here's capitalism, here's socialism, here's all these different things and the way they worked, right?
Yeah.
For this, it's like, here's this different leadership ways of doing it up until we get to like where we're at, like the age of grace, right? But when I look at these kings, and it's like, this king rose up for, and served for 2 years and was killed by his people.
Yeah.
And then the people returned to their old, to return to their old ways. Or this king stepped in when they were worshiping pagans and all these false gods, and he implemented, the following of the God of Abraham, Jacob and Isaac. And then they were prosperous and things were great. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, I'm like really cutting this down. And it's like, there's that aspect of it. But then when I look at the great men in the Bible does a real good job at not making them look super great. Like really showing their faults. Like I was talking with somebody recently and I was like, don't jump to conclude, don't jump at me on this one. I was like, but I've been learning a lot about Daniel and King David, and King David specifically, like God was obviously with that man. Like look at the things he wrote, like the Psalms, right? Like beautiful influence on his life from the God that he served, which is the God that we serve.
Sure.
And then I look at some of the things he did, and the one thing I really cannot get over that he did was take one of his head guys in the army
Yeah.
who had a beautiful wife. And I got to think like, all right, we're all men. Like, all right, when I was in Spain, in Bible college of all places,
Right, easy,
if
Carmen.
I sat out on my balcony,
Yeah.
which was beautiful, and there was no air conditioning. They don't believe in air conditioning or ice.
Wow.
So I got to my balcony,
Barbarians.
which was right above the way, like the waves were crashing right by my building, like to the ocean, and on this beautiful island. And I'd sit out there, and out of the corner of my eye was always a bunch of boobies. Okay, because they would go down there, and there's these young,
Wow.
beautiful European women on vacation, and they're just popping the girls out.
Okay.
And I'm just like, sometimes I read my Bible, and then I start shifting away, and I'm like, man, those are some great island boobies. I'm just being honest, right? Like, so we all have that moment. Like, it was that was the
real Carmen,
temptation.
ladies and gentlemen. Just we gotta crack one open.
And it was always the joke. Like I'd be out there and they're like, looking at some tits out there. I'm like, actually, it was really hot. I wanted to be out here. Those boobs just happen to be there all the time. Like,
Yeah, I'm sure that's what you tell your wife.
yeah. But at the same time, it's like, that's what it reminded me of when I thought about David, looking out at this woman bathing on a roof. And it's like, that temptation grows, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure he knew that she was out there at certain times and kept going out there and maybe fantasized when he was alone, like about her. Like this wasn't like he saw her on the roof and made this decision. He allowed sin to enter his life, right?
Yep.
And he did a very evil thing. He had her husband sent to the front of the line and then have them retreat and let him be killed by the enemy forces just so he could sleep with this man's wife. What a disgusting way to go about adultery. Like it wasn't like he just used his influence as the king to secretly like sleep with this woman. No, he did it in such a filthy way that ended a man's life, that destroyed her life as she had it. Her bubble was popped by him just for his sexual desires. And yet this is the man that wrote Psalms. This is the great King David. And that's not the only thing he did wrong. Like the list just goes on. And you watch this man what's the big difference? He repented and returned to God in those moments.
He did, yeah.
And you watch what God was able to do in a fallible, which we all are, a fallible man's life, and where he was able to erect this man and what he has been now in the history books. And it's hard to say this about Trump because of all the stuff that we've seen and lived through, but I start saying to myself, how is he any different from any other man that God has used? And I really didn't think of Trump like that. I mean, a little bit, but man, do I truly feel like watching. Most of us have seen the clip where it shows his head just turning, or the rendering of it, of what that slight little movement went from us watching, this man, our ex-president's head explode on live TV.
Yeah.
Right? Versus what we did see. I cannot see it. I cannot say, well, you know what, I'm saying it's God, but maybe it's... I literally cannot see any other outcome other than that God was truly there and did not want this to happen. God knows what would have happened had he been murdered.
Yep.
And it was stopped. There's nobody that on this earth that's going to convince me, my heels are dug in, that was divine intervention. And so now my eyes are on Trump in the eyes of what is God doing in this man's life.
Yep.
Because I don't think he left him alive to do evil. Like everything that I'm seeing post that is positive, is humble. I'm starting to see bits of Christ-like actions, of just what I want to be as a Christian and the changes that God pushes on me. Like you were talking earlier, being a Christian isn't a lifestyle to live if you want to be complacent and comfortable.
Yep.
It's a place, it's a lifestyle that is constantly challenging and rewarding, and also has a lot of suffering, right? And you have to have that willingness to experience it all, to enjoy, the outcome of it, and be okay with whatever that outcome is. Watching Trump with the context of what I'm saying, I believe we are watching one of what, if the world lives long enough, one of the greatest men in our history. I don't feel that way about any other president that I've lived through in my lifetime. And it's hard to say that without feeling like I have a lot of bias of being a supporter for him.
Yeah.
I'm trying so hard to strip that away and just look at it in general. But I just see that there's something very big going on here. We are living through a very historical moment. And I want to learn as much as I can from it and change from it just as much as I'm watching Trump change. So when I talk about the way I used to love watching those people get hit, and I'm watching how Trump probably loved getting those jabs and because you'd be in jail. It's one greatest moment, right? I loved that moment. A lot of it just feels stupid at this moment. And I'm like, man, what are we truly fighting for? I think the reason why we've seen a lot of celebrities or just people in general coming to God is we've reached a point where we've pushed God away and we are getting a glimpse well, not glimpse, we are seeing at least the direction that the depravity of man will go towards. And I do believe we're inherently evil. I believe we have to make a choice to fight against our inherent nature. And that's what makes us, America. We fight against that. Our morals, we are a Christian nation. Our laws are based on biblical morals. And that's what that means to me. When I say, we're a Christian nation, it doesn't mean that we all are worshiping Jesus, but our foundation of our nation is built on the teachings of the Bible. We have strayed from it, and we see where that brings us. And I think we've I think we've got a much clearer vision of what the world is. And it's very much turning into evil and good. Good and evil is becoming much easier to see. And it's you could follow that path until you start coming face to face with evil, which I think is mutilating the bodies of children, pushing forth, destructive behaviors, raising up destruction and smashing morals. It doesn't make any sense. I think we're getting a glimpse of it, and I think a lot of people are coming face to face with evil and saying, you know what, this is not what I want.
Sure.
They might still have the idea of, oh yeah, I want people to be free and this and that, but they're seeing what direction that a lot of us are choosing in that freedom or in that, liberation that we've been experiencing over the past, couple decades. And I think people are truly fearful of coming face to face with that evil. It just doesn't feel so hard to miss. I just feel like it's becoming more black and white. You could see things and it's all right, this is no longer about love is love. There is a lot of evil being portrayed, and we have reached a place where we do need to fight for this country. We do need, and that's where it goes back to the inheritance that I want to leave to my children. The best I can hope for is some semblance of what we were taught as kids that America was supposed to be. That foundation is still there. I was talking with my mom recently, and I talked with my sister, and man, I can get real disheartened when I talk to them about politics, because I get the idea of let it all burn down. And that, I've never really shared too much about this with them, because a lot of times my heart is a little broken to hear it and I don't know how to respond. But what it really boils down to is I feel as a man, we need women so much. And the biggest thing that I need from my wife, who I love dearly, is support. I don't want her to support me down a dark path. I value her input, but when I want to do something that's challenging and the world is telling me no, or people at work are telling me no, or just the response I'm getting from interactions are just beating me down, the best thing I can get that keeps me going is to come home to somebody who's going to say, don't give up. We still support you, and you can do this. Mm-hmm. It's so important. It's so important. And I believe that all the women in my life have that ability, not just to the men, not just to their husbands, but also just to the men in their life in general, to be supportive in nature and to be that nurturing side. And it's sad because, they're so quick to give up, and they cite the Bible because of it, saying like, well, in end times, America's not really mentioned. I'm like, well, neither is Russia. Like, we assume that these places are Russia. We assume that these places are China. We don't know.
Well, and there's different views, like dispensationalism.
I've also mentioned that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Like,
Yeah.
don't take the side that you believe and then like be willing to burn your whole life. And what was like people died to bring us this crazy free nation. And it's like, and you just want to say, burn it all down because God.
Yeah.
That's not like, we were entrusted with this. Like, we were given the opportunity of being born here. Like, that is becoming more and more evident to me as the world gets connected and we're able to see what life is like in some of these really dangerous areas and like watch the dangers that they're facing or the war that these children are involved in. Like,
sure.
I personally don't feel like I deserve it in any bit, like that I deserved to be born here, but I am, and I was, and it wasn't, I didn't earn it. But damn it, do I want to earn like keeping it this way? I want to protect it. I want to fight for it. I want to
make it better.
Exactly.
Yes, I get that.
I just feel like we were born in a time where things were so damn good that we forgot how it got so good.
Yes.
Right? I mean, we talk about the fourth turning, right?
I know, fourth turning.
A lot of people are familiar with that
PVD.
now, and it's like, man, it's really becoming evident that, that cycle of, good times create weak men, weak men create bad times create good men create, strong men create good times.
I'm just letting you roll with it.
Anyway, it's basically, it's a cycle, but man, does it make sense?
It makes sense. For me, it's, I've had, a pretty healthy increase in my fervor for America, this beautiful country. I started listening to a podcast, which I want to plug, because it's fantastic. I'll just say to those listening, the bulk of your time should be spent listening to Deep Fried Thoughts, first and foremost. Okay, so put away Joe Rogan. Put away all these other distractions and just listen to this podcast because this man right here is the greatest man, the best, all time. Everyone else, they're terrible. They're the worst. Love this guy. No, but in all seriousness, this podcast that I've been really, really enjoying that's like just increased my love for this country so much. I'll say it's two things. It's moving from Washington State where you want to talk about the temperature there. Okay, no disrespect to the homies back home, but like, there's a very strong progressive culture in Washington State. Big surprise, Seattle. And I'll just say that predominantly what I heard when I was there was a lot of kind of shitting on America, and it was like fun to just like talk about, remember slavery, remember what we did to the Native Americans, remember all these things, right? And to just totally fixate on all of the low points in our story arc. And I ate that stuff up and, that's what I was being served. So that's what I consumed. And moving to Virginia, where like, Virginia is a much more balanced state in terms of like, there's a lot of conservatives, but there's also a lot of progressives. Like it is by definition a very purple state. Like I would be very surprised if it goes to Trump, but people are saying it might this time, this election cycle. But I don't think it's gone to Trump electoral college wise. I just remember like moving to Virginia, and and then this is another win in the Virginia column. So just keep your tally. I remember hearing like we have a Republican governor, and I was like, those are words I've never heard. Like Republican governor, like my governor is a Republican. Like that is weird. And he's actually loved. I mean, people were putting him as a possible, Glenn Youngkin was going to be possible VP choice for President Trump. I mean, he was in the short list, supposedly. But what I will say is this podcast, which is called History That Doesn't Suck, excuse me, it is such a great podcast that I've been enjoying. And what I love about it is it basically follows the history of the United States from pre-Revolutionary War all the way up through history, and it's chronological. So each episode is an hour long, and you know it's really well scripted. It's not just freestyling them talking, but it's a really well scripted with sound effects and instrumentation in the background. And I've always been a sucker for history, and I've always loved American history. And like my favorite class in high school, I took an AP government class, which I think I had a C minus average, maybe a D for like the whole class. But like the depth of knowledge that we went into, in terms of like, we went deep into like, all these different, I would have never gotten this level of depth is what I'm trying to say if I went to like just a standard history class that would have been like what you take as a senior or whatever, or a junior in high school. I learned so much about government, and I just loved it and ate it up. And my grandpa was a huge history buff. He kind of instilled that in me. I always had it as a young child. And I used to really look up to people. I remember my favorite historical person. I used to read a book series that was called The Freedom Fighters. And they were like illustrated books for kids. And I remember it was like Abraham Lincoln. And my favorite freedom fighter of them all was Harriet Tubman. And what's so funny about that is like that was like before like all the DEI stuff came out. I mean, black woman. But like her story was so compelling to me. Like I was like, this is incredible. Like she's selflessly helping people escape slavery and like on the Underground Railroad and bringing them to the North. Like that is incredible. It was just a really cool story. This podcast, I cannot recommend it enough because what I've discovered is like the analogy that I said earlier about the Trump press conference with Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, and the handshake that apparently didn't happen, that was a slight or whatever. Like, we have a way as people of just, people will just say things like, yeah, Columbus was a piece of shit. Or they'll say like, well, George Washington had slaves. And it's like, those are true statements to a degree. But like, that's not a refined understanding of these people. Mm-hmm. Like these people, like if I just, to use an analogy, it's like if I just met you and we had a bad run-in or something, I might think you're just a total jerk. But that might not be at all who you are, like if I looked at the complete story or the complete picture of who you are.
Which one of us wouldn't be looked at like that if you were to look at their worst quality or worst day or worst moment, worst decision? Like,
so it's like, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that from a big, like from the big picture, it's like America is just like terrible and shitty or whatever. Like that right there in and of itself. And then you break it down into, well, how do we get to there? Well, George Washington. Well, it's like the argument that America is just this bad country and we're just terrible and we should just be ashamed of being Americans. Like it literally is supported by these just snippets of like, oh, well, George Washington had slaves. And it's like that in and of itself is just a snippet of like, yeah, he had slaves. And yeah, he was, historically speaking, like in this podcast, what I'm trying to get at is this History Doesn't Suck podcast. It basically helps understand like just the conflicted nature of like who George Washington was as a person and his growth as a person. Because in his 30s and 40s, like if you go, I haven't done this tour, but I've been told like you go to the Mount Vernon plantation where he was, and there's like this really sketchy part where you go into like the dungeon where like there was like basically a torture chamber for like slaves. And it's like apparently it's pretty like emotional. Like you go in there and you're like, this is messed up. And like we can read accounts of George apparently in his 30s and 40s where he very much acted according to what was common during the time that he lived in, which I think is another thing that doesn't get brought up enough. Like we tend to judge people with today's understanding of things.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we don't tend to think of like the fact that like, okay, well, during that time period, and again, it doesn't give anyone a pass, but like if you think that we're living today like these perfect lives, it's like we're doing things today that we're probably going to look back on and go, man, like that was terrible. Like the hubris to think that like we are the best generation and we're doing it all perfect. We're just crushing it and nailing it. It's like, there's no way. George did things in his 30s and 40s that were like awful. I mean, he did things through his whole life that were terrible. He's a sinful man. But what's fascinating is end of life, and this is the podcast does talk about this, and it does this with other founding fathers too, is it also shows that like within George there was a conflicted nature to his opinion on slavery, and that was something that was challenged in him over the course of his life, and that even at the very end in his will there were slaves that he granted freedom to, but that he like in his 50s and 60s, as he was kind of approaching the end of his life, he started to engage in practices that at the time were not common things. Like we talked about this earlier today. He wouldn't split up like a family of slaves, which again, you can look at the bigger problem and say, well, the fact that he still had slaves, but it's like everybody else was splitting up families because that was the most profitable way to handle your slaves. He didn't do that. He kept the family units together, which honestly, I mean, it was to his financial detriment to make that decision. He knew that it was evil. He knew that it was wrong. And even at the very end, he wanted to free all the slaves, but because of his arrangement with Martha, she was the wealthy person that he married, he couldn't just free them all, because if he would have freed them all at the end of his life, they would have just been like recaptured, and like, so he had to be strategic about it. So there was a whole plan that he had of how he was going to like accomplish this. And all I'm trying to say with this is that number one, the podcast is useful because the podcast gives us like a better perspective on the nuance of that time period. And it helps us really get to know like the person better, both at their best and their worst. You know, Thomas Jefferson was married to a black woman, which is like really interesting. And there's a whole story around that too. And I mean, a lot of these men were deeply conflicted with slavery, and they honestly felt powerless to make those changes because of where the country was at that time, because they knew that it would cause that division that ultimately took place at the Civil War. But at that point, the country was so fragile because it was new. Again, it doesn't give it a pass. I don't want to make anyone think that like I'm condoning slavery or that I think that it's okay or that what they did was right. But I do think that that when you take into account like the time period, there's just a lot of nuance that goes into it, is all I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of nuance that goes into it. And I feel like we tend to judge from today, we tend to go back in time and we tend to judge that time period with we're just way harder on ourselves and on our country. And I think that if I could just summarize the whole thing, I would say that like I think we're a better country when we love this country, is what I'm trying to say. Like I think that if we just focus on what we've done bad, like let's also talk about what we've done well. Let's talk about World War II. And let's talk about the fact that, you know, we stopped Hitler. I mean, that's pretty incredible. So anyway.
No, that's well said.
That's my soapbox.
It's interesting. Like I hear people say that, and it's usually in response. It's either like a virtue signaling when they're bashing, you know, America, or it's like something positive was said, and it's like, yeah, but
yeah,
and it's like I just don't know where else in their life that makes sense to look at something like that. So I guess that's. If anybody is listening that feels that way about America, like, it's okay to have your opinions, but if your response to something good is to point out the negative, it's like, where else in your life does that make sense? Like, do you have people that you love or admire or care about in your life that you could look at in the same light and they come up faultless? Like, no. It just doesn't make much sense to me. I don't see the good that it provides.
Yeah.
I don't see any net benefit in responding like that. I know I could see net benefits in looking at history and looking at the bad things and learning from them, but the response is what I think always bothers me with that. Like the reason that those things are brought up and said is never in a positive light. Not a positive light, is never in it's never doing anything. It's never helping anybody.
Sure.
It's never making things better. Yeah, man, there's nothing in life that's going to improve through that way of thinking.
So here's
It's sad.
So there's two crazy ones. One is Christopher Columbus. This is just for anyone that enjoys these kinds of tangents. Within the whole Trump mischaracterization thing that I realized, it kind of made me a little bit skeptical of how things are being reported or how people think of things. Christopher Columbus is a really interesting one. I would recommend that people go out and actually watch some of the videos on YouTube that actually defend Christopher Columbus, because that man has been he's been dethroned from his holiday. It's now Indigenous Americans, which okay, so I'm okay with that, honoring Indigenous Americans, but I don't think that the way that Christopher Columbus is characterized, and I don't want to tease it too much, but it's not fair in my opinion, based on what some of the actual documentation, the actual literature says, from that time period. And I watched some interesting lectures on YouTube about that. But then the other one too that's really fascinating, and this one is super highly controversial, but Charlie Kirk, who I adore, which again might make some people cringe because, he is a really strong believer and loves Donald Trump. But this Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, he actually came out and basically said that Martin Luther King Jr. probably doesn't deserve a holiday, which I was floored when I saw that video title. I'm there is no way.
Was he making a point about
it was
his
so
flaws?
Dude, it was wild.
Because I missed this.
Okay, get this. So just let the record show that every Martin Luther King Jr. Day for the last couple of years, I take the time with my daughter to watch the I Have a Dream speech together. And when we went to Washington, D.C., we went to the Lincoln Memorial, and I talked about Lincoln, but I probably talked more about the fact that Martin Luther King stood right here and he gave this speech to everyone, because I saw it in Forrest Gump. So I love that man. And so for me, it was there's no way. There's no way. Charlie Kirk makes a point, and again, this is a fun little YouTube rabbit trail if you want go rabbit hole or whatever, if you want to go down it. But he basically makes a point that the I Have a Dream speech, number one, was not written by Martin Luther King Jr., which is not necessarily an indictment on him, because there are many people that read speeches that are not written by them. But that speech was actually not in line with what he said predominantly in other writings. That was actually in some sense almost an isolated perspective that he had, and that there was far less unity that he was calling for. And that the part that everybody loves and remembers, which is judge my kids not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Mm-hmm. That's the part we all love and cheer. Absolutely. As conservatives, right? And Democrats alike, we're all yeah, we're all on board with that. That honestly is not really in line with what he was about. And also, when you get into the, like you said, the lawlessness of his life and the people that were in his circle and what some of the things that they did, which again is funny because we just started talking about character and judging someone. So, so in a sense, we're kind of double standard, we're kind of going back and forth on that. But the thing that's interesting about it is that Charlie Kirk points out that he still feels that Martin Luther King Jr. deserves to be remembered, and that he would put him as a good person, overall, what he accomplished was good. But to give him this mythological status, that he basically says that the approval rating of Martin Luther King Jr. at the time when Reagan decided to make that holiday, he was 30% approval rating. He was not very high, because he was very divisive in a lot of ways. But not in a good way divisive. That's what people think.
From my understanding, what I was taught, guys, I've read some things from him and listened to him speak otherwise, and it's real like pushing towards violence and like
And-
hateful.
Yes, and like he engaged
from-
in these orgies and like
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really sketchy stuff.
From what I understood, and I just took it at face value, you know, being told this was that, you know, his ideas had shifted throughout his life. Just like Malcolm X.
Sure.
You know, when someone tells me they like Malcolm X, I was always want to ask them like, which Malcolm X did you like?
Yeah,
You know,
which
And,
version?
yeah. Did you like old Malcolm X? Did you like young Malcolm X? Or like, you know, yeah, it's interesting. But so I'm curious if a lot of the things we're talking about, I don't know the time frame of those. I don't know the chronological order
I think
of
it
some of the
was later-
speeches I've heard
I think it was
versus
later in
the
his
I Have a
life.
Dream
Yeah.
speech. So I don't know if he was changed later or not. I'm curious to hear that video. Because, I mean, if anything, like net positive, like that speech is amazing.
It's amazing.
And the
It's
fact that
incredible
he
speech.
said it is enough for me. I'm all about that holiday. That's interesting. I definitely want to listen to that.
I was thrown, and again, I'm not like saying I'm like. I guess my opinion of him has been somewhat like it's an evolving thing. I think that we should keep an open mind, and with
Yeah.
all things, with all people,
The other thing, too, is that
both good and bad.
I've never really exalted the man as much as I've exalted the ideology of that speech. That really is what he is to me, is that speech. It's not about like him and the fact that he died for that cause. That to me is what's important. So
Sure.
like that moment is what he's remembered for, is this positive moment that changed the nation in one way or another. Yeah, it's interesting. What was the guy's name? We went to Old City today. We were at Independence Hall, the original Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence was signed, and we made a wrong turn trying to go in there and look before I was denied access. What was that guy that we were looking on the wall? And it was
Yes.
what museum was that?
Balt, I think was his last name.
Bolton?
Balt. I thought. Who was he? Yeah, no, he was. He was a like they. It was an interesting exhibit where they were drawing the flora and the fauna.
He was a guy in Philly who had a nursery.
Yes.
And was bringing over a lot of seeds, which is such a weird thing to think about because nowadays you just go to Home Depot and you get like whatever, go on Amazon and order whatever you want. But it's like at this time, like this man was preserving all these different things. Dude, first of all, I was blown away at the preservation of pieces of paper that had like ledgers of like the one that we were looking at and the guy came to talk to us. Or no, I guess it was next to that one.
Yeah.
It was just like a guy's order of seeds. And one of them was like I think they said it was the Jefferson tree or something. Anyway, it was just like, you know, the different seeds that the guy was ordering. And I was like, oh, this is really cool to see. Like, it's a grocery list, right? Really, but written in like the early 1800s.
Yes.
And then we start looking at other things. And I remember looking down and it's crazy how this was only like 200 years ago, which I guess when you're little, that sounds like a lot, but when you realize that a person can live close to 100 years, like even if you're dying at 70, you know, whatever, 80, it's close to 100 years.
Yeah,
so it's like 3 people ago.
3 people.
It's, you know, at most. And it's like, I don't know if you looked down at it, but I saw one and it was a receipt for a woman that was sold.
Yes.
It's hard to have that experience and that moment when you're surrounded by people and you're looking at kids and, you know, and you and I are talking and then you look down and you see this thing and it's just like, I felt a little blindsided by it. I wasn't expecting to have the reaction I had internally and I didn't really want to have like this emotional reaction to it there because I was just trying to take it in for what it is. And, you know, there was a lot of things that had very important meanings all around us. But that one, man, I thought about that for the rest of the time there. Like it just kept popping in my head. Of like a bill of sale for a human being. It's
gnarly. I mean,
it's amazing in some aspect, like that, like that we are here this quickly, where we're at now.
It's crazy. So one of the things that I was telling you about after we were discussing that was in that podcast. Again, I come back to it, but it's been. I mean, I listen to it a lot. I drive a lot. I listen to the podcast a lot. History That Doesn't Suck. You know, there is a very dramatic introduction to one of the episodes, which they do these dramatic introductions where they kind of highlight like a very real story from the time period that they're going to kind of break down. And I forget exactly the time period, but it was like this horrific event where there's a mother and her 2 kids that are at this slave house auction. And it's this very dramatic moment where the children are being split up and being sold to 2 different owners, and she's being sold to a different owner. So the whole family at this point is completely being like destroyed in a moment. And you know, the account was that the mother was just wailing uncontrollably and pleading that the man buy both of the children, and so they wouldn't be split. And I mean, I'm listening to this in the car, and as a father of 2 daughters and being married, it's like, you know, how can you not think of your own children in that scenario? And just the thought that, like, you know, to never see your kids again and to not have your freedom and to be split up. I mean, it is absolutely deplorable. It is one of the lowest moments in our history. It breaks my heart. It absolutely breaks my heart. It's devastating.
The other side of that, and the reason I brought it up is because I don't really know anybody that would argue the depravity of that. And yet we are on the precipice of probably how things like that started. Dehumanizing somebody.
Yeah.
You know, for that, it was like the color of their skin. And like, I've listened to a couple like just old racist people talk, and it's like, they're lazy, they're this, they're that, and it's just because they're black. And it's like, it wasn't even like a hatred for the person as an individual. It was just like this weird thought of who they were. And it's very odd.
And how much of that too, and this is what I've wondered, is like what someone says is like a racist thing, like, oh, they're black. It's like, in some ways, it's actually more of a classist thing, which I think is something that
well, if you take away the word of whatever ethnicity, yeah, a lot of it does feel like you're just describing someone poor versus
correct,
you know, educated.
Yeah, it's like poor people. Not always. Again, these are generalizations. This isn't true of everyone, but it's like, you know, there's probably more laziness to be found in poor people than in wealthy people. And I know that there are people that are going to challenge that and say, oh, well, that trust fund baby hasn't done an ounce of work and received all that money. But we know that statistically, like, most millionaires in this country are self-made, which is a Dave Ramsey statistic. My point with that is that, you know, and we all know that there are people that work very, very hard that are underpaid for what they feel like they ought to be paid for what they do and what they contribute to the world. So I don't want to devalue that, and I don't want to say that it's correlative, that like your level of wealth is correlative to how hard you work. I mean, but there is some truth to that in a way. Like, if you're not working very hard, you're probably not in a higher class. And so, again, you know, it's there's nuance to everything. Is what I'm trying to say. Not everything. Jesus Christ is king, but.
It's just weird to see that we can go back to those things. Like, if we don't stop. Like, to me, that's the proof of the inherent evil within us. Is that if left to ourselves, we don't tend to choose the positive way of life. Like,
sure.
I don't know. I've done a lot of self-reflecting. It's hard to really put it all. I've done a lot of self-reflecting lately.
Yeah.
And just myself, what have I done to contribute it? You know, I even like moments on here where I'm like, you know, I don't want to share what I really feel because I'm still working it out. Usually that means I'm like very hateful or bitter towards something, or like I know I'm wrong, but like I'm almost like just enjoying that hatred in a weird way, like enjoying the fantasy of vengeance. And it's like, man, like, what is that worth? What does that really mean? What am I lacking that I want to find someone to have vengeance with? Like, what does it mean for those that are not anti-Trump because of his policies, but the people who are, you know, we see popping up online right now saying, you know, that they wish he didn't miss, or that they wish he was dead. It's like, what are they really saying? What is really lacking in their life? And then again, it makes me look inwardly of like, well, what am I lacking that I would find any joy in someone else's pain, just because we think differently? And I really hope a lot of Americans are doing that, no matter what side you're on, or if you're listening here and you have some bitterness, or maybe you felt ramped up when you saw what happened to Donald Trump and you wanted to fight or be vindicated in some way, or, what is causing you to desire that? Like, what is lacking in your life that's what you're trying to fill that void with? There's something else, right? So that's what I've been trying to figure out for myself. It's interesting. So you and I met in Bible college.
I feel like this is where the podcast should have started, but we decided to go 2.5 hours into.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you've kind of let in on a lot of things anyway, through our conversation. You seem in a really good headspace, especially like with your response to some of the things we talked about earlier and have discussed. We met in Bible college. When you meet in Bible college, like
Bible school,
it is a college. It's accredited.
Yeah.
We're not going to agree on this. I put in some college.
Yeah.
On my
good for you. Okay.
Applications. Anyway. No, I'm just
I went to
joking.
JUCO, so that's my some college, but Bible school.
It's biblical theology.
It's not. Although some people cleverly were able to swing that into a bachelor's. Have you heard those?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's accredited. You could definitely do that.
Well, they had to go through some hoops, but yeah, good for you. Yeah.
Anyway,
it was a fun vacation. Thanks, Mom, for paying for some of it.
When you go there, there's the girls that are there for as they say, the ring by spring.
Bridal college.
Yeah, there you go. It's bridal college.
Yep.
You got the kids that were forced to go there by mommy and daddy.
The troubled youth.
Yes. You got the people that are genuinely out there searching. Even some non-believers who are just searching. I encountered some of them. That was interesting.
Yep.
And then for me, my camp was I got nothing else left. I am destroying my life with my addictions and my issues, and I desperately need God. And I am looking for the bubble that people complain about. I literally don't think I can survive outside of it, and I need to be taken away from my life and put into a life surrounded by God. That was me. And I went there. I mean, obviously I was who I was, but inside, a lot of me was desiring to just listen more, even though I was very, loud, I would say. I really did want to go and learn, but it was hard to break away from the person I was. And that was both in Germany and in Spain, both semesters I went through. But anyway, what was your experience before going there? What camp would you put yourself in? Yeah,
so strangely enough, Carmen and I lived very different lives, but in some ways very similar trajectories. I just think that, as I've gotten to know Carmen more over the years, and then through the podcast, I'm convinced that Carmen, when we talk about living life to the fullest, Carmen does everything at 11, like Spinal Tap would say. I'm a more subdued version of Carmen, so everything that I do is less interesting, but kind of a similar path. So in the same way that you were coming there to escape some of the bad stuff that was going on back home, I feel like that's kind of why I was going to Bible college, that first Bible school, that first semester that I went in Germany in the spring of 2009. For me, I had my best friend at the time, Taylor Richards. He kind of twisted my arm and he's like, "Hey man, I'm going into my last semester. Come with me. Let's go do this thing together in Germany. Let's go on this really fun experience." And I was in a very, very bad place, living on my own, in a pretty rough part of Federal Way, which is south of Seattle and has some pretty unsavory areas. Although, I don't know if they're quite as unsavory as some of the places that you took me through today.
A little taste of Chester.
Little taste of Chester, dude. Yeah, we watched a a kid without a front wheel on his bicycle, like just driving like a
Yeah.
unicycle
Yeah.
with a wheelie, and then we saw a guy in a
Well,
motorcycle.
first we had dirt bikes flying past us
Oh
the
my
wrong way down the
goodness.
road.
Like pod racers.
Yes, which was totally normal. And I heard your reaction as they flew through a very narrow gap going the wrong way past us. And I just kind of chuckled to myself.
And then we heard what we thought was maybe a gunshot, but it was one of the motorcycles that like crashed at full speed into a moving truck behind us.
Yes.
And it was like that scene in Dumb and Dumber where they're like in the limo and like you see the explosion behind you. And like I looked behind and I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope he's okay.
There was like a very quick moment where I was like, there's a gunshot, right? Like I wanted to say, like, 'cause we were talking about gunshots,
I know.
and then pop.
I know. And I'm like, oh, my ear. So anyway, but yeah, I was looking to escape. I was like, I got broken into. There was drug use. Some pretty hard stuff for me. Not again, you do everything in 11, man. For me, it was coke. For you, it was meth. It's like, you know what I mean. But anyway, pretty just looking to get out, man. Super lonely, super dark place. My buddy was like, hey, we've been friends for a long time. Let's go on this fun adventure together over in Germany. And the Lord did some pretty good work on my heart. I remember like lying on the application. Like I remember saying that, I really doctored up my relationship with God. And they had some fairly kind of personal questions about where your standing with the Lord is. Probably trying to vet you.
I certainly lied on my Germany one as well. So,
but I grew up in church, right? So I kind of knew the things to say.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is always Jesus. And so anyway, they accepted me. The college accepted me. And anyway, I had a pretty intense encounter with God. Where, I was in the car driving and this song came on and it was Before the Throne of God Above. And I literally just broke down weeping. And I remember in that moment, I had this feeling that I had really taken God and I had shrunken him into this tiny little pin dot. And in that moment, it was kind of like this big bang explosion where it was like, I realized that, in my best effort to just eliminate God from my life, I could minimize him only so much, but he could never really truly go away. And it was like, I had this intense spiritual moment where it was like a rush. And I just started weeping uncontrollably. And I realized in that moment that like, I had been living just such a selfish existence that was so focused on me and not focused on the God of the universe that truly loved me, like unconditionally. And he wanted so badly to have this relationship with me, and I just kept turning him away and rejecting him. It's like a friend that just wants to be your buddy and just keeps calling and calling and calling, and you keep just saying, no, I'm busy, buddy. I can't hang. I'm not into it. And it was just so incredible. I couldn't believe it. I was working at Guitar Center at the time, and I was driving to Guitar Center, and I ended up getting on that airplane like a month later, flying to Germany. I remember landing, and the first person that picked me up at the airport was, do you remember Ben Viscara?
Mm-hmm.
You remember Ben V? Dude, fellow Italian brother, believer. And I remember like getting to the Bible school, and I remember being like the first person to arrive at the school. So there was like no one there. I was there like a day early or something. And I'll still never forget Guillaume. Do you remember Will? I don't know if you remember him. Guillaume.
I remember the names more than the people sometimes.
Yeah.
Looking back that far.
Yeah, from Belgium. But just desired so deeply to be an American. Like he was a true patriot back then. Like I didn't even love like the country whatsoever, and he was like all in. He's like, I love America. And I'll still never forget, he talked with a pretty heavy accent, and he'd be like, Doritos and America. He had like a weird accent. And I mean, I sat down and picked my bed or whatever, and it was like that season in my life, that time, that Bible school experience. I met you, I met Harrison, Stephen Vargas. Got to give shout outs to all the boys. The Var guy, the trilogy, man.
They were a tribe of their own.
They were the tribe, dude, of Sammy, Crystal, Steven. You had Taylor, Alex. You had Lomas, William Lomas.
It was a good group of guys.
Dude,
Still think about a lot of them all the time.
Ruloff,
You included.
Remember Ruloff?
No.
You remember Martin, who looked like the angel Gabriel.
Yeah.
Oh man, Dabney. You remember Dabney? Phil Woe. How can we not forget our pill popping machine? Do you remember he was my neighbor. He was right next to Phil Woe, and I'll never forget the riddle he told me. And I still use this whenever whenever someone asks me like, "Hey, what's a riddle?" I only have one riddle, and it's the one that Phil Woe taught me. He goes, and he's from Jersey. He goes, "A man is holding a bay. What's in his eye?" And I'm like, "What?" And he repeats it. He's like, "A man is holding a bay. What's in his eye?" And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Beauty. Because beauty's in the eye of the beholder." Classic,
yeah, that sounds like him. Dude,
Phil,
that's
dude.
funny.
And then you had like Guzik, man, the
Yeah.
legend.
David Guzik.
David
for those of you
freaking
who don't know.
Guzik. Dude, Bible commentary machine in like 1,200 languages, including Klingon. The guy was amazing.
It's so funny. I forget who was it I was talking to, but they were reading his commentary and thinking he was like this old deceased theologian
Like
who
Martin
was just
Luther.
like very wise, for his time. And then to find out like, oh, he's like still alive and writing these now. Dude, to be taught under that man and like, did you do the Bible teaching course with him?
So I remember you. I don't know. I think I may have sat in. I don't think I was in preaching and teaching the year that you
Preaching
took it.
teaching is what it was, yeah.
I was there the following year. So I came back in 2010, which is where I met my wife and where I went to school with Nicole, who might be listening, I would assume. Props to Nicole today. It was great. We had some good food.
My sister, by the way.
Sister Nicole.
Yeah.
Brother-in-law Brian. Good people. Good kids. Great kids. Amazing
The
kids.
best.
The
The
best.
best.
Phenomenal kids. Great sandwiches. But no, I took the preaching and teaching class that second semester, but you guys took it the first one. But I remember listening in on your sermon that you gave. For some reason, I had nothing going on, which was common because it wasn't a real college.
How dare you?
And so I was listening to your sermon. I remember you preaching because I remember people were like hyping you up. Like they were like, "Man, Carmen is like got this gift, dude. He can like preach. He can throw down." And I remember listening to you preach, and I forget what you preached on.
The 7 fishes.
Was it that what it was?
No.
Dude, you were amazing.
No, the 7 fishes is an Italian dinner. That was a joke.
Oh gosh,
Never
you're
mind.
terrible.
Anyway, no, it was the
You
feeding
were-
of the 5,000.
Was that what it was?
Yes.
And you crushed. Like I was like, dude, this guy has got an anointing. Like it's a travesty that you're not a pastor, dude. Both of us got screwed on that Dutch door action.
Mine was a choice.
I know.
I chose.
Yeah, I kind of chose too. Let's be honest. At some point, it's like maybe I'll choose it. Maybe I'll change.
Not to change. I'll tell you, my reasoning was that my personal life was falling apart, and I was teaching. I was teaching like every couple weeks. I was preparing sermons and teaching in front of people who really needed to hear that message.
Yeah.
And I remember dealing with some issues at home where like my house was so beyond in being in order. And then to sit there and try and tell people like, and when I would share this with people that I was in ministry with, I don't think they could fully comprehend how bad things were going and how much of it was my fault.
Yeah.
And how much I was like, contributing to the problem. It wasn't just a matter of like, well, we're all, short, we all fall short, to, the glory of God. But like, it was like, no, like I am literally like living two lives. That's how I felt. I felt like a phony. I would sit up there and I'm like, there is something very not okay with the way I am portraying myself up here and then how I am reacting to things at home. I was like, I need to step down immediately. and I don't want to have to explain everything that I'm doing for you to make me step down. So like, please respect it.
Okay.
And that was the position I was in.
But you have a gift, and I think maybe
Anyway.
this is a good outlet for you. I mean, I will say that like you are a gifted speaker. You have good. You relate well to people. You're a man of the people, and the way that you talk about the faith, very disarming. I think. I think you really grasp the other side well, and you've lived it too. That's another thing. And we talked about that a little bit with pastors that haven't really spent a lot of time out in the working world. Sometimes there's a little bit of disconnect there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Where they can't quite relate to the challenges and the problems of their congregation. Well, I guess. So I don't know. I think you do a great job. But
Thank you. Sorry.
no, I know. Yeah, we're kind of multitasking here. But dude, Bible school.
I loved it, man.
CCBC, dude. It was like a dream. So what I do want to make sure we talk about the mountaintop experience that I had with you and a few other guys. And I want to figure out if you remember this. We were taking the Joshua. We were in Joshua together.
Yes.
This is so nerdy for people that like don't know about Bible school. It's like, so yeah, we're in Joshua together. It's like, hey man, walking through the halls. It's like, I'll see you at Joshua. So, and just so everyone understands, for the uninitiated, this school, the way we talk about it, so Carmen wants to pretend that it's like a university, like it's like a college. Okay. We met in a big house. Okay. It was a big ass house. And there was a church and it was in Germany, but like, it wasn't like any kind of like proper like college, like you would think. Like, you walk through a college or a JUCO or whatever, you're like, okay, those are the buildings or whatever. This was like, it was kind of grassroots. Okay. Like we all had, bunks, meals were provided. Sometimes we made jokes about the food. We had to all walk down this same path to the church where, they had, it was a church campus that had like different buildings, and we would meet in different buildings for our different classes. And the classes would range from books of the Bible to general things like preaching and teaching and stuff. And it was like a 3-month semester, and it was affordable because it wasn't real. It was incredible. I mean, everything, it was so foundational for me. I joke about it, but like, it was so foundational. So many things, like 3 out of my 4 groomsmen were all at that Bible school. My friggin' wife, I met my friggin' wife through that experience. Best decision I ever made in my life outside of Jesus Christ. Yeah, it was incredible. So it was awesome for someone like me, who's just such a lover of people. It was like everything I would ever want in like a season of my life, because it was just people all the time. Like you go to this dining room, it's like, oh, well, these people are doing that. You go over here, it's like, oh, well, these people are out here. You go outside, it's like, oh, well, these people are playing music. It was so fun. We were playing ping pong, foosball. I mean, we did some schoolwork, but really we just tried to beat each other on the ping pong table.
To me, it was very much of like a communal.
It was communal.
We all shared the load of the chores.
We're
and
socialists.
the jobs.
Dude, we're socialists.
But like, it's funny because like people make the argument about Jesus being a socialist, and it's like, I don't think so. But
we produced nothing during that season, but we had so much fun.
Yeah, we had a great time. It was fun. Very pure.
Oh, but the Joshua.
Yes.
So I don't know if you remember this, but Connor Berry led the Joshua.
Mm-hmm, I do.
Right? Connor Berry, if you're out there, we'd love you so much. The Vans.
Is he still in Germany? It's
no,
funny. I
don't think so.
I have several listeners in Germany, and I always wonder if it's him or Lomas or something. I'm like, who the heck is still out there?
Well,
I always assume it's somebody from college.
Yeah. It could
or
be.
like a group of it's a couple of them.
School.
Anyway,
So Connor Berry, I think, is in California. I stalk him a little bit on Insta. I'll never forget the Vans, the skinny jeans, but just such a gifted teacher, dude.
absolutely.
Connor, you made a huge impact on my life. I'm sure Rocco Vasilino over here says the same thing.
Dude, I'm going to divert for a second here.
UFC, dude. Connor was like the UFC guy. Remember that?
Oh, I remember never being able to take him down or make him or pin him. Yeah,
Dude.
it's funny.
He's a huge guy too, by the way. Like built like a freaking
Oh, he's a tank.
just jacked.
In my like absolute stupor of addiction, I was like posting pictures of me like with floozy girls and like in strip clubs and like just debauchery photos, like things you don't share on Facebook nowadays and like fear of losing your job. I was like, I couldn't find enough of like filthy photos to just like share the lifestyle I was living. And I thought it was cool. And it was so shattered with one comment from Connor. And it said, dude, you're breaking my heart.
Whoa.
And I had other people put stuff like that, and I would just be like, delete, goodbye. But he wrote that, and it was very sobering.
Oh, man.
And I don't know why it crushed me so much, other than the fact that, like, without even knowing it, I respected him on a very high level and his opinion. And that one really hurt. And I think about that comment. This is a long time ago. I think about that comment like a couple times a year. Like I'll be going through something, and I heard his voice through the computer screen.
Yes.
And it was so impactful. Like
Man.
I think I've even shared this with him at some point. I might have written it or DM'd him or something. But if I haven't, and he's listening, dude, it has stuck with me for my entire life.
It's honestly, it's a lesson in the fact that like sometimes when people are going through that stuff, I feel like our tendency is to just kind of like retreat and go, okay, we got to just let them do their thing. But man, like if you can word it the right way and you can do it like with the Holy Spirit and you can just say it the right way, like a timely critique like that can just, that can really impact someone's life.
Because it was like after Bible college, and I knew that I was not living to my potential. Like that's what it said to me. Like to me, I read that of like you are not doing what you were called to do.
Do you remember?
That's how I heard it.
Do you remember in this Joshua class, Connor was leading the class.
Yeah, sorry.
It was the guys, the boys.
Oh, I remember this time. Yeah,
it was be strong, be mighty, be what? There's a B series. They were all B, and they were different books. And courage, maybe courageous. Be courageous. I think we'll have to look
that was one of them. I still have it. It's in the garage.
I think that might be it. And we went through the book of Joshua. There was a night where we finished the book of we finished our class, and we did our closing prayer together. You know where I'm going with this?
Mm-mm.
Closing prayer together. And the closing prayer normally would just wrap up, and we would just leave. And we would it was like 9:00 or something, and we would just the evening's getting started. This night, I don't know how it happened, but it was honestly one of the most like phenomenal spiritual experiences that I've ever had in my whole life. Because it did not wrap up. It kept going. And people were praying in that group. You were praying, I was praying, Taylor was praying, Alex was praying. I forget who else was in the group. Maybe Steven. I don't remember who was in the group, but everyone was like interceding in a way that was like, it was nuts, dude. Like it was like charismatic. Like it was epic. Like I felt in my soul this like attachment to you and every other guy in that room. And it was like what you were saying was like being like it was being like reaffirmed vocally. Like as you were praying it, we were like boosting it. Like, yes, God, yes. And it was like, dude, I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, I'm sure from the outside looking in, people would say like, oh, you just had like there's probably some scientific thing or that took place at that moment. But it's like in that moment, I can't tell you how real this was. Like I've never prayed in that way ever before. Like it was a true like anointing. It was like everyone in the room was of one mind. We were all of one mind in that moment. And it was like, it was so spontaneous. I remember the doors were closed and people were like some of the ladies and stuff were like looking in, not sure, like, why are they still in there? Like, why is because it was in the main room where we all met. And so it was a very central location where everybody would hang out. That's where we had our class. And like, it's interesting because I've talked to people about deep prayer sessions and no one has ever really, and I'm sure others have had this, but what I'm trying to point out is that I think it's such a rare experience that like, I think there are many Christians that have never actually had this kind of experience where like there is just such an outpouring of energy that I just don't even know how to describe it. It's beyond words.
I've experienced it very few times, and I always experience it as the purest, most euphoric high I've ever experienced in my life.
For someone who's done a lot of drugs, that's saying
Oh,
a
it
lot.
is like
It's clean though.
it is that's what I mean. It's literally
Yeah.
so pure.
Yes.
It's like I'm literally high off of the energy that is always around us, and I am literally like losing the gap between me and the energy, and it's like the very oneness of the universe. It's to me that's like presence of God.
Oh.
Just you're in it. Yeah, absolutely.
And I just wonder sometimes, like, I think it's wrong to expect that every time we go to pray.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some people that would challenge me on that, and they would say, no, you go with that expectation. But I think that the way I kind of view it is like it's a special thing.
Absolutely.
Like you know, when you go out on a date with your wife or something, it's like there are times where it's going to be more interesting than other times, right? But when it's awesome and it clicks, you're like, man, this is incredible. Like when you have that like amazing experience, you're just like, this is so awesome. And so that'll be a memory like with you and like just some of these other guys that like I've never been able to like forget it. Like it was truly incredible. It was awesome, dude. I will say, it wasn't all high mountaintop experiences. There was some crazy stuff that went down. Start the highlight reel. Let's go.
What are you thinking about specifically?
All the stories, dude.
Oh my gosh.
Because there's a story that I really want to tell.
What is it?
I feel like coming off of that, it feels wrong to like just go into like debased stuff, you know? But I have to go there. So, okay. Like the iconic moment. Now, I told this story to Phil Woe, and Phil Woe seems to think that I'm misremembering this, and that it wasn't Carmen Vesaturo, that it was maybe John Luke. Who was it?
Well, I don't know.
It was
I don't know
someone
where you're
else.
getting at.
So the story goes like this, and I'm convinced I saw this, but I don't know if I forget. Maybe I misremembered. Maybe someone said it to me. That's the problem with memories. And mine's not great. I'm convinced that I saw you. I was waking up in the morning. You were sleeping in Phil's bed for some reason. I don't know if you were napping with Phil. The nap time thing was really weird because you guys were really into nap time.
Yeah.
Whoever's listening to this is going to think
siestas.
like that we were in some weird cult where there was a lot of weird stuff. Okay, I promise it was non-sexual, okay? I promise you. There was nap time going on amongst the boys, okay? I never partook of this because I have boundaries. I have standards. But I woke up in the morning. I looked over at Carm. Carm, like, apparently had a dooner. So, and you can tell me if this is wrong or not, if this is you or not. But for the listeners that have never been to Germany, let's just talk about what a dooner is. It's basically the Turkish version of a gyro.
It's so much better.
But it's
the
so
doner
much better.
kebab.
It's the doner kebab. And it's basically like a pita kind of thing. It's not pita, but it's like a bread kind of thing, like a roll. And then like doner fleisch, the meat from the doner. It's like a lamb mix thing. It's
Were you a mit pumice?
mit pumice or mit mayo?
Mit mayo, yeah.
Or
It's with fries
mit
and
salat.
with mayonnaise.
Mit
Yeah.
salat. See the mit salad or the mit with fries.
Yeah.
But anyway, this was like the currency of the Bible college. Everyone at the Bible college ate the doona. And it was a nice way, it was sometimes a nice way to break up the insane amounts of pasta they would give us every time for food because it was cheap. Noodles got old very quickly. But I'll never forget this memory where Carmen goes to bed and apparently he fell asleep with a doona by his face because he was eating it and he just fell asleep. And then he wakes up in the morning and I look over and he sees the doona and he pulls it up to his nose and he sniffs it. And then he just starts eating it.
This is 100% true.
Was that you?
This is 100% me. It 100% happened.
He sniffs it first.
Absolutely.
And then goes on to eat it.
Do you know how few of those I had versus a lot of other people? I was not wasting that. In fact, I very specifically remember getting, I don't know why this just popped in my mind. I got 2 of them that day and I couldn't finish the other one and I had it by the bed. And it's like, I don't think we even had fridges or something. And I just remember
you didn't
like
have fridges. No, you didn't get up. You were
wanting
too
a late
lazy
night
to
snack.
get your ass out of the bed. And so you just had this doona just chilling there.
Yeah.
And you were like,
They're delicious, man.
and apparently it just lived all night by his bed and he just ate it.
100%. I'm
But-
not even ashamed. I would probably
But
do
like
that today.
what's sad is that I feel like that story loses a lot of its significance because of the fact that on this podcast we've found out that this is the man that eats out of trash, trucks. So
Listen,
it's really not that weird.
no.
But
It's
again,
like when you do heroin once and then the next time is not that. It's not like, oh man, that guy did heroin. It's like we've already passed that boundary.
like,
We're
whatever.
just doing heroin again. You know?
But then the other story that like just got me. I mean, this one for years. I mean, you got to understand.
That's so funny you remember that.
So I feel like being on this podcast right now for me is like such a like bucket list thing because like I don't know if you realize just how much like you were like this mythological being because of my time at the Bible school because I feel like we never really had like a super tight friendship there. You kind of scared me a little bit, but because of just how intense you were, but also like the fact that you were so larger than life. It was like we were just on different levels. Like what you had experienced at that point in your life compared to me was just we were just on different levels. And so like over the years there was just this like mythological retelling of Carmen. It was like he's just this giant thing, like from Princess Bride. So the story that like got me was at some point there were always some shenanigans going on. Like every week there was something new. And like for this week it was someone decided to start getting hair dye.
oh my God.
Like, and I don't know if it was Harrison or who like
It was
got
the
the
girls.
idea.
It was the girls. Yeah. They were dyeing their hair and they had blonde.
They're dyeing
And
their
red.
hair. So I don't know who did it first, if it was Harrison or who, but Carmen gets the idea to dye his hair blonde. Now, if you haven't seen Carmen, now you can go to YouTube and watch the podcast. So there's a little plug.
Just look up
But
Slim Shady
I mean,
and then add
look
100 pounds.
at the freaking icon on Spotify. Like that's Carmen, okay? If you didn't know, that's Carmen. Like he's an Italian man with very, very, very dark hair. Very coarse dark hair.
I'm curious to know how much of this you remember because this is something
Okay.
that haunts me, the
Well,
following portion of this.
No, but this is just, dude, this is so good, okay? Carmen gets his hair dyed like bright yellow,
Yeah.
okay? And like I can't even explain to you just how ridiculous he looks. Like he's got like the darkest eyebrows and then just like
Super black eyebrows,
and his
super yellow blonde hair,
eyelashes.
like bleach
Eyelashes
blonde,
are really
yeah.
dark, so it's really clashing hard. Okay, so then Carmen gets the idea. He's like really like distraught about this. He's upset. He's like
Did not turn out the way I thought.
he
it would.
doesn't look good, and he's very very concerned about it. So he's expressing this in a way that's just making us all laugh. So what does he do to fix the problem? He has Joanna, I think. I think
Yeah.
it was Joanna.
Yeah.
I think she dyed your eyebrows yellow to try to match.
Well, it's
the
supposed to be
hair.
blonde. The whole thing is supposed to be blonde, but it turned yellow.
But then he just looked even more stupid.
Hold on a second.
But no, but you got to get to the best part.
I did not mean to dye my eyebrows blonde. Here's what actually happened. We looked at like the amount of time you're supposed to leave it in.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there was also a time to leave it in, or there was times to leave it in to turn blonde. And then it showed like you go to your color of your hair and then how long you should leave it in to get to these other shades. And it was supposed to be in for 2 minutes. Joanna put it in the bathroom. I was like, I'm just going to walk around. And I went to go look at what Phil was doing. And dude, like, you talked about earlier of having like the total ADD, right? I looked down at Phil and he's playing on his laptop the game Spore, where you start out as like this little tadpole and you grow into a... I look at it and I'm like, that's amazing. Dude, a half hour, whatever goes by, and my face starts burning. And I was like, oh my gosh. I get up and they're yellow like my hair.
So yellow.
They're so bad.
So his eyebrows, so his hair is yellow looking. And it looks so dumb.
Yeah.
And then his eyebrows to match, she dyed your eyebrows yellow. Yeah. So we're all laughing at you because you look so bad. You look so bad. I mean, it's honestly like the funniest thing ever.
I hate that photos of me at historical places. I was looking
there are photos
like that.
of this. We got to find a way
so bad.
to put this up so the audience can see what this looks like because it's awful.
So bad.
So then it gets even better. So Carmen falls asleep on the bed, right? And these guys are pranksters. And they're pranksters of another level. I mean, the pranks that Carmen does are just, gosh, I would be a mess. I couldn't handle it. It's so intense. Everything's at 11. So one of the guys, I think it was Harrison, possibly, he takes like a serious amount. I don't think you were asleep. I think you were just chilling on the bed. He takes like a very large amount of red dye and just literally like wipes it all over your hair.
No, all right. So I bought brown. I went to the store to buy brown.
But it wasn't brown.
Well, it was. It just didn't come out brown.
No, but he did red dye because do you know what I remember?
It turned red.
Do you remember what happened right after he put it in your hair?
No.
You got out of bed and you sat with like just such like a disappointed face. Like you were just so sad. You were like, now I look like freaking Bozo the Clown. And I remember like looking at Will, the Belgian guy, and he was laughing so hard. We were laughing so hard at what we just witnessed. And so your hair was all red.
Yeah.
And so then it became this game of like, how do we blend this?
Maybe that was when I bought the brown afterwards.
You bought the brown. No, you bought it afterwards.
Panicking.
You were panicking because you had this blotch of red in your hair. And the fact that you just without a like in the genuine nature of that, like now I look like freaking Bozo the Clown, and it was like you were so bummed, and it was so genuine. It was so funny. It got me so, dude. I was rolling so hard. I'll never forget that day. Dude, hysterical.
It's every once in a while in my the timeline, it'll pop up, and it's us visiting this historical castle, and I am. Everywhere I went, I had the hoodie. I don't care what the temperature was. I had a hoodie on, and it was like pulled with the strings tight, and all you could see is like weird red, pink, brown eyebrows.
Which is so funny because looking at you now, it's like you could have just gone for the skullet, man.
Yeah. I don't know why that never crossed my mind.
Why didn't you just shave it? It's not a skullet.
Well, the eyebrows.
The eyebrows. But still, I mean, you could have at least solved one of the problems. It was a bad choice.
There's a lot of photos of that. Yeah, dude, these were great times, though.
You took over my bed. We talked about that earlier. So I was sleeping next to Phil.
Excuse me.
I was sleeping next to Phil, and then Phil Woe, and then Carmen just decided to like commandeer my bed, and he just smelled so bad. And you just sat in my bed, and you're like, "I'm not leaving." I'm like, "What?" So I had to just go find a new bed. So I took the Eagle's Nest, which was like the high bunk.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is not probably that interesting to people that are listening.
No, definitely not. But it's fun for us.
But it was fun for us.
But yeah, dude, yeah, it was a great time. It's funny. I had a lot of fun. I wish I would have taken it a little bit more serious. A lot of it was foundational for me, but dude, I fell so hard and so quick when I left. So hard and so quick. I never took the time. I learned things theology grew. Foundation, I didn't realize until much later how much it foundationally meant to me, but I guess like I ignored a lot of it very quickly. And I didn't make very good changes when I came back. It was so weird. When I came back, dude, my mom like was so proud of what I did. I'm like choosing to go there. I hate that she listens because this is gonna eat her up and make her feel bad, but it's life. She was like touting me around as like, all right. She would bring me to a family member and be like, Carmen is like, doing so good. You know what? I don't want to tell him. Carmen, you tell her what you told me. And I was like, Jesus saved my life. He's doing all like that's how it felt to me. Of me being like, I was lost and now I'm found. Like that's literally who I felt like, and I felt like I was being touted around as like this saved new boy, and it made me so bitter towards it. And I'm like, I get it. It's my mom. She's trying to show me off, and I'm like, but it made it feel very not real to me, like repeating the same thing over and over. And dude, it's weird. Like I still wanted a lot of the things that I wanted before that I maybe didn't achieve. Especially like romantically with, the opposite sex. That was like probably the biggest downfall for me. It was just like wanting, like I still was bitter that like in high school, I never had a girlfriend and like never had this. And it was like, I wanted to have the experience without like diving into a marriage.
Yeah.
Which a lot of young people around me were doing. And I was like, I don't even know what it's like. Like, all I know of love is porn. Right? Like, and which it means I didn't know it.
Yep.
I knew nothing of it. Man, I gave up all of my so-called morals, all the things I thought I stood for, a moment's gratification with a female. And each time I did something like that, it's like, man, you just fall further and further. And it's like, I still only had that porn experience. It wasn't real. None of it was ever real, except this time it was truly changing like me.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like a video that was demoralizing me. It was like these were life experiences and connections I was having with people that I will never be able to undo. Connections in your brain, like scientifically proven to like truly alter who you are. And it just fed into the depression, and I went so deep. I tried to run so far away from everything that I learned in Bible college and everything I thought I wanted. I never felt like I deserved it after that with a lot of my choices I made. And I mean, it made me who I am today. It's like on one side, it's like, well, I'm glad I wouldn't change a thing. But the other side of me is like, man, I would change everything. Like I would have married my wife many years sooner. I would have devoted my life to God at a very early age. I would have just been more loving and caring to the people that I wasn't, loving and caring to. But all I could do is live that life now as best I can so that my children can hopefully desire to be what I attempt to emulate for them.
Yeah.
And I think as a parent, as a Christian, as an American, it's the best we can do. We can go set up a table, change my mind, and own these young kids, or we can yell at somebody on the street for having an idea that we don't agree with, or we could beat a child for not acting like we want. But I think at the end of the day, the best thing we can do, the most powerful thing we can do as an individual, is make that change every day in your life, because people do see it. I'm sure Connor didn't realize how impactful him standing up and saying that to me was, or other people that have confronted me in my life, or just little things that people have said that, I didn't react in that moment because I don't want to give them the satisfaction, but like, human interactions, they can be life altering.
Yeah.
And that's not always for the good, and I want to make sure that as best I can, that my interactions with people that might be life altering are life altering in a positive way, or at least giving an opportunity to be a positive change in that person's life. And looking at the way the country is going, I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen in 3 weeks from now. Like, things really are still on a thread. Like, I don't know what's going to look like 3 weeks from now when this is released, or 2 weeks from now it's released. And I don't know what it's going to look like in November, or even, after Trump is, I think he's going into office, but even after, where it's like,
You're confident.
whether he is or not,
Yeah.
in 4 years, there's going to be somebody else. And like, there's a new generation that is raising up, and like, they're going to be taking care of us if we live long enough to allow that, if we're blessed with a long life. And I think that regardless of our differences, love has to be stronger than that.
Yes.
And we have to do more than just say that. It's better to not say it and to live it than to, to live it and not say it than to say it and not live it.
Well, I mean,
believe that, right?
Talk is cheap. I mean, that's one thing that I think I've really taken away from, I don't know, the last couple of years. I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that, people will say this and that, but they'll actually show you with their actions what they really care about. And I do that. Like, I show what I care about with my actions. And so if I can love my family well, in terms of like greatest impact that I can have, I mean, it's my family, bar none. I spend more time with my wife and my kids than anyone else. I can have a conversation with someone on the street about politics or religion or whatever, but I'm going to have the greatest impact on the people that are with me every day, day in and day out. And so that's become, for me, something that's become more clarified in my mind, because I think, sometimes it's a distraction to think, oh, well, I'm going to go, I'm going to serve in this youth group and help these kids, or I'm going to go do this thing or whatever. And you kind of forget that, like, your primary ministry, your primary calling is to your family, the people that are closest to you. And it just so happens that those are the people that you can have the greatest impact on. But I think sometimes there's this weird lie in our head that we think, like, oh, well, that's not as sexy as like something else, because we're with them every day. That familiarity just kind of breeds this like complacency sometimes with your family. And you kind of forget that, like, actually, like, that is like priority number one, should be, so.
Absolutely. Dude, this was great. I really enjoyed this. I think it's a good time to wrap it up.
Dude, it's fantastic.
Thank you very much for coming out.
Thanks for having me, man.
Anything else you want to share?
We didn't get to? I want to say that Carmen's family is amazing. And if you get the chance to meet them, definitely meet them, because they're amazing people.
Thank you.
Your kids are awesome.
I appreciate it. Dude, I am so blessed.
I love your kids. They're amazing. They've been so nice to me. We've played plenty of Mario Kart. Your daughter was elbowing me in the car, but it was, it was fun.
My kids, you are like the biggest thing that has happened to them in their recent life. They are obsessed with it, with the time they've spent with you. Or my son especially. It's all he talks about. It was so funny, dude, the other night. Like, listen, kids don't know any difference. But do you remember last night when, I forget what happened, but they were getting ready to go to bed. And they were like, oh, I want to sleep with Brandon.
Yeah,
Thatcher was in the guest room. I'm going to sleep with Brandon. I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. Dude, my daughter did not kiss me goodnight or let me tuck her in, because she was pouting in the corner of her bed, wouldn't look at me until I finally got out of her. Like, what is going on? Like, baby, no matter what, like, I love you. Is there anything like that I can do to help with what you're so upset about? And she turned around and goes, I just wanted to sleep with Brandon. We made an impact in like 20 minutes of being here.
They're
at that
such
point,
great
or an
kids.
hour.
They're great kids.
We had such a good day, though. It was so funny. They just didn't want to leave your side, is really what the point is.
The fact is that Carmen and Jenny do a fantastic job of raising their kids.
I don't know what I'm doing right.
You guys do a
or
great
wrong.
job. You guys are amazing.
We're just there. We're present.
Yes. And you're great people. We had a lot of fun today. We had a lot of fun yesterday.
Yeah.
We'll have a lot of fun in the future.
There you go.
On that note.
Awesome.
Deep fried thoughts.
So for those of you that are still listening, I appreciate it. Love you guys. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube if you're not already there already, or Rumble. And we'll see you next time.
Deep Fried Thoughts. It's the best podcast. Deep Fried Thoughts. Don't worry, we're working on a better intro.